threw away the hard drive into the local dump. While in China, the BTC exchange opens for business despite the bank warnings. Just in, it is official, 7-Eleven have now started accepting bitcoins. Is this the new online currency for the future? Stay tuned.
I had 10,000 bitcoins, do you know what I would buy? Get you that car you wanted, yeah, the one with a rear-wheel drive. You could teach me how to drift, I'd be so cool, no lie. And I'll sit there by your side as you whiz up the freeway close to 155. If I had 10,000 bitcoins, I would take us on a tour of all your favorite breweries up and down the coast and more. And we'll sample all your favorite beer and sit out in the sun. And slowly getting drunk all day, it's you and me, we're always having fun. Having lots of money, that won't make you happy. If you're super duper rich but all alone, it's having someone to share the dream. I'm so glad that you share mine with me. If I had 10,000 Bitcoin, I would pay for you to fly, so you could get your license to soar up into the sky on a private plane, so we could disappear at any time. We'll take a trip to Catalina Island or even to Hawaii. Having lots of money, that won't make you happy. If you're super duper rich but all alone, it's having someone to share the dream. I'm so glad that you share mine with me. It's having someone to share the dream. I'm so glad that you share mine with me. I don't have 10,000 Bitcoin, yeah, I've barely got a dime. But a day does not go by where I don't work hard and I try to be the best that I can be. And when you're by my side, I don't need rocks and diamond pearls, 'cause I'm the richest girl in love alive. Money, money, I like money. It's fun when we've got some money. BTC, EMT, GOX, I'll keep on trading and I'll never stop. Wow, until you tell me to, 'cause I wouldn't know what to do if it wasn't for you. Yeah.
There will be no real non-controlled currency in the world.
We're coming for you, banks.
Listening to different podcasts, like in a whole different reality, which they think completely different things about Bitcoin.
They have got my money in their banking system. I should be able to access it, right?
Our player is live.
There's a good number of fucking, like, pretty smart Bcashers.
That's also what she said.
Hello and welcome back to the Bitcoin Cash podcast. Following Bitcoin Cash on its rise to global reserve currency. This is episode number 144, Strategic Reserve and BCH Bank Run, featuring Joël, Valenzuela. Today is Sunday, the 9th of March, 2025. The BCH Bank Run, which we're going to talk about, fucking worked, and I don't care who says otherwise. BCH $366.78, which is up. We've risen from rank 23 to rank 18. one BTC sat buys 227.3 BCH sats, which is also way up, and one ETH buys only 555 mega sats. We're also way up there. Selene 30-day users 846, and the Tokenaut TVL was only about 2 and a bit thousand. So I thought it was bugged, and I asked Matthew, and he said no, everybody got liquidated with the price moves, and so all the contracts are being put back into 30-day, into 3-month contracts. So there genuinely is only like 2,500 BCH in our DeFi at the moment. So really got to get cracking on that. Anyway, our guest today has been on the show before, but not for a very long time. What did we say? It was like in 2022, right? It was freaking ages ago.
Yeah? Years. It's been years and years.
It's been absolutely years and years. Well, I would be a bit of a time trip to go back and watch that old episode, I'm sure. But anyway, he is a big Dash advocate, and he's going to get us all the latest on what's going on there, and runs a digital cash network channel, as well as various other things. I can't keep track of. There's a bit of a man with 1,000 hats, really. I can't keep track of how many different things he is doing. Welcome back to the show, Joel. Tell us what you've been up to.
Well, as of today, I've been fighting off a little bit of a sniffle. So if I don't sound as good as, usually, then you get what you pay for. Sorry, this is what you got today. But yeah, just been working very hard. Life, I kind of feel like... I feel in a opposite sense where a lot of crypto OGs, where I kind of feel like this is the golden age of adoption for good projects. It just, you got to not look at the headlines or the market cap rankings for the piles of money coming in here and there. So that's kind of my big perspective.
Okay, you're feeling good about things. So what are you working on at the moment? Now, I know you've been sort of in and out of Dash, and then you're back in and back out, and then they did that their masternode funding situation. Can you just explain that, by the way? I've never been such a big fan of that, but just give us the breakdown of how that actually works. Yeah,
so Dash is the oldest DAO in existence right now, kind of the pioneer. Basically, out of the block reward that comes out, 20% is available for anything really, like dev funding, etc. And so the network votes, basically anyone with money votes every month where are we going to give this to, if anyone. A lot of times they've just been like, no, we're not creating those coins, we're just not. And then basically anyone with one Dash as an anti-spam measure can put in a proposal, and then there you go. And so because it's such a bare bones kind of thing, it's kind of like to a certain extent, if someone started like a flip starter to get funded for something, I'm going to be an official BCH ambassador, this and that. You get funded. Sure, you're off to work. How official are you? What does that mean in a decentralized network? Some people argue that like DAO votes are like binding, like, oh my gosh, you're the guy. So, but it is what it is. So I kind of took an interest in Dash in 2016, again, before the fork ever happened. Started, did some work for Dash from 2017 to 19. Then from like 2020 through 2023, kind of did my own thing, started the podcast, started doing all kinds of other things. And then from January of last year, I've been doing full-time biz dev and marketing for the Dash DAO, kind of heading that thing up. But being my own self on the side, as far as my keeping the podcast going, again, because there's no like employer or anything, I just say, this is what I'm going to do. And so, there you go. Some would say I'm the official representative of the network. Some would say he's just a scammer. I don't know, make up your own mind, but I'm out here doing what I'm doing. And mostly this year has been a lot of talking to projects, a lot of like talking to businesses, a lot of making deals, the biggest deals, and especially this year going to be doing a lot of travel. In a couple days here, I'm going to Amsterdam for Web3 Amsterdam. It's going to be a good conference. And then May is going to be pretty crazy. I think I figured out that I might be going to 6 conferences in 4 different countries in May, which it's kind of like a tour at that point. And hopefully I'll get some rest after that, because that'll be fun. But anyway, I'm sure I'll be sick at the end of May, just from all that.
Yeah, I had no idea actually that Dash could vote not to hand out the money. I thought they kind of had to give it out to someone, but they can just say, no, we'll just not not do the extra inflation, nobody's worth the money.
Yeah, and obviously, I speak for myself. I own my own opinions. Whatever, if people want to yank funding because they say something on this show, well, so be it. I don't care. But I like the DAO model. I think it's a great idea. I do think that there's things we could improve about it, and we could supplement it, and we could do other things. And there was a proposal a while ago to change where unspent funds, rather than not be created at all, which is a deflationary effect, which is good, but it's invisibly good in the short term, I should say, that it would just still create the funds that weren't spent, but just give it to people. So you could see you saved this much by not funding bullshit. You could actually see that, and then you'd be more likely to be stingy. And that never ended up passing. I still want to try to push for it again at some point, but because of like the amount of funding is constrained with market cap and stuff, I don't think people fund dumb things today, and haven't really for a couple of years. So it's one of those like self-solving problems. But I would definitely, at some point, I could talk for hours on the subject. I would like to figure out alternative funding methods. I've been a huge fan of Flipstarter, and I don't think that Flipstarter, it's a binary choice kind of thing. I think that every project should have something like that, whether it's like the Monero form funding system, or Firo has one like that as well, or Flipstarter, because not everything should, one thing's for sure, I don't think everything should be funded through the DAO. I think most things should be funded through profitable businesses, and other things should be funded through donations and people who care about this subject. And so I'm sort of spearheading as a side quest, because again, I have so many of those, like a privacy overhaul for Dash, and that is not going to, I found external funding for that, right? That's not from the DAO at all. So I'm kind of in those, I crowdfunded my first month's salary anyway, as a way of showing that you don't need to just be limited to this. And I'm just trying to learn, because none of us really know the best way of doing this. And we'll see. So that was kind of a lot.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a ton of different room for experimentation here, right? Because the BCH community, obviously, as you well know, rejected Amori's attempt to put in a Coinbase reward on Slice, a taxation to himself, on the grounds, well, because it's not Bitcoin, first of all, but just because it doesn't make sense, because once you sort of establish that kind of thing, then it becomes a bit self-perpetuating, right? It doesn't matter if it's effective or not. Once you have a pot of money, somebody is going to grab it and use it and waste it. And then if you want to take it away, all the people who are currently entrenched in it are going to be upset and make a big deal about it, even if they weren't doing anything very effectively, right? So you've tanked the efficiency of your economy overall. I mean, it's ironic. It's the same thing we're seeing in the US government at the moment. And so I think the BCH community is very skeptical of any of those funding from the kind of Coinbase things, which is one of the reasons that I've never particularly liked that Dash idea, because I think it sounds great in theory, but in reality, it just has so much room at the edges for things to go wrong. But I didn't know that they could vote to not pay it out, which is quite an interesting element to it. And then with your proposal, do you get voted every month then, or is it like a 3-month or a 6-month kind of deal? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's you can put in multi-month proposals. They're up for, it just determines how frequently you have to put in a new one. But multi-month, every month there's a voting deadline, and at the end of the voting deadline, then however the chips fall is what gets funded. So you could get defunded at any month. It's like you get funded month at a time, but I put in for a quarter at a time, just to say, of course they could yank it from me at any point, but that's kind of how it works. And I do agree that I've sort of started to realize that there is no one size fits all kind of model, maybe. And the more it's one way, the more you have to have certain things a different way. And so, for example, eCash, Amari's thing, is an interesting idea there, because if they just forked off to do all these things and had a purely Flipstarter based model, I think their product, their market cap, their et cetera, I think it'd be way lower at this point. Like, and it just, because it's all around like the vision of this, but then if he had to go campaign for donations all the time, it'd be a lot of wasted time. He wouldn't get as much money to do stuff. It just doesn't work. The Flipstarter model works great in BCH and Monero, not because it is, but because the communities have been sort of conditioned to, use them and do that kind of stuff. And then there's other, donation only projects. Like, I have to say, like, I've been a much bigger fan of Litecoin recently than I used to be. It's kind of interesting, their whole trajectory. But Litecoin, as far as I know, like, struggles, despite being way up there in the rankings, relatively speaking, struggles to find funding for almost anything. But then for MWeb, which is a great upgrade, they got, first off, as far as I know, just one full-time developer cranked that thing out. And they just got enough donations, enough things to just get it through, but got a lot done despite the lack of funding. But then if you're like down the totem pole of the market cap rankings, you just like, what do you do for money? It's kind of an interesting thing because these are social sort of public, I hate the word public good, so I'm not going to use it, but something like public good. These are like, for everybody technologies. And obviously, there's a mining budget for all proof of work cryptocurrencies. It just, and obviously the fee revenue hits at some point, but it's still socially kind of dispersed amongst like, well, there's this much, and anyone who mines gets like a piece of that kind of thing. Obviously, it's not like a business. It's something else. It's not like a business. It's not like a government. It's like something else. And so we're still figuring out the best way to deal with this something else, I think.
Yeah, but that's what makes it so interesting. I think that's probably why you and I both love the industry so much. We can watch it all play out in real time. I mean, I've always been fascinated by economics since I was just a kid, but I always also found that in trying to talk to people, I mean, I was quite young at the time, but people I was trying to talk to were economists. I felt like, but there's no engineering component to this. I was missing that element of like, if an engineer tells you I can make a plane fly, you can say, where's your plane? Does it fly or not? But if an economist tells you, well, the correct inflation rate is 3%, I'd be like, well, prove it. Like, what about if we just set it to 10%? Then what? Or what if we set it to -5%? And then they would just kind of have a lot of like nonsense, basically a lot of words, but very little like reality in it. And I think I'm sure there's great economists out there, but I've generally found people attracted to that field, like the fact that it's kind of vague and you don't have to really get down to brass tacks. But then crypto just completely solves all that, because it's just like, well, if your idea is better, build it. And even if your idea of somebody else's crypto is better, well, then you could split it, chain split, and boom, prove it. I love that aspect. That's one of my favorite things about crypto. So we are watching, like, especially recently, BCH has kind of created in the market a bit, right? And LTC pumped. LTC went from, 22nd or something to like 12th. And then we reflipped them, and then they flipped us, and it's like this ongoing battle as we watch it play out over the short and long term, really, right?
Yeah, and especially like crypto is such a weird place, and people have not figured out how this is going to work. And I think maybe when we get to strategic reserve talks, I'll kind of get to get a little bit about that. But I think we're kind of in the death throes of the purely speculative cycle for crypto right now. And nothing makes sense. Like, if you look at why did something pump or not pump during this period of time, there's almost never any hard data you could point to definitively. The only thing you can see is like over 5-10 years, kind of like a long time frame, how well are these things doing, but also like transaction volumes and other things. You can kind of point to those on the macro, but even then it's very fuzzy. And it's kind of like, foreshadowing, like with Monero's decoy transactions, there's real ones, and then there's a bunch of fluff fake ones around it. And it's hard to see the real ones with the decoys. And you notice this with price charts sometimes, mostly when an asset bottoms, unfortunately, where you see the real price. and then you see all the pump stuff that was on top of it that was fluff. And then once the speculation goes to like statistical zero or whatever, then you see the actual like utilitarian price underneath. It was there the whole time, but people were just guessing how much of that was utilitarian, how much of it was pump.
Yeah, and how much do you follow Ethereum as well too? Because I know we talk a lot, obviously, but in general, we don't get too much into the whole weeds of the Ethereum stuff. We're more on the sort of digital cash side of things, right? But do you pay a big amount of attention to what they're up to on a daily basis? And what do you make of the fact that they are, as far as I can see, once again talking about changing their monetary policy because they're now net inflationary again after the merge didn't fix it, and then there was the ETH Foundation drama as well. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I am not quite as up on the recent things. Like I didn't know about there's a recent change being proposed. Do you have a TLDR of that one, or you didn't look into it yet?
Just it's been like sort of a running. So ETH is now net inflationary again, right? Because for about a year and a half after the merge, it was going down. The burn, we've outsmarted the BTC guys. We're geniuses, ultrasound money, right? And then of course the market adjusted and was unwilling to pay the additional burn premiums on all their transactions, which lowered their demand, and then it started going back up again. So now there's more ETH than there was at the merge 2.5 years ago, right? Now, it's not directly related to that, but partially as a consequence of that, they started doing all these graphs of staking rewards, and they figured out that, wait a second, if we have staking and some people put money into the staking and other people don't, then you're basically just diluting the people who aren't in the staking. So more and more people put money into the staking until, I don't know, whatever they're at now, it was like growing, it was like 70% or something. And they kind of realized, wait, why did we put in this stupid system in the first place? And we're talking about, we need to tweak things so that the amount of people staking goes down, which is what everybody was like, told them it was stupid to switch to proof of stake in the first place, you know? But of course, nobody ever listens. They always have to learn their own lesson.
Yeah, the interesting part about that is there's two things. Ethereum's such a complicated thing that I can't really be like, oh, I know what's going on. I have an idea about two things. So one is our mutual friend, Justin Bond's famous early Bcasher, sort of agree heavily on this one, and then we don't really agree on the other one. The one part that we agree on is Ethereum pivoted to L2 scaling, i.e. just let a ton of other blockchains just take all their business. Just literally said, we are open to competition. Boom. And obviously, big blockerism reigns supreme. Obviously, I'm not preaching to any choir. I'm preaching to all the choirs here, right? As far as they should just let the network scale, but they intentionally.
Well, I don't know that I agree with that though. In the case of ETH, because they're EVM chain, it's not a UTXO chain, so they're really like between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, it is more challenging because of the global state kind of considerations, but they were working on sharding, execution sharding, and they had it on their roadmap and they conveniently removed that. There's a bunch of projects now, like, Multiverse X is kind of like the big one up there that can do 10,000 plus TPS or whatever it is, with a fully state sharded chain that's all 3,000-4,000 validators, whatever other metrics you want to get. But basically, they're doing what we thought Ethereum would do, but they pivoted in a sinister way, to profit these L2s instead of the main chain. And then now that's what we're seeing is like Base is killing it, Arbitrum's killing it, Polygon, all these L2s are doing great, and they're just sucking the life out of Ethereum. You can see that in like everything, and that's where the ultrasound money meme backfired. Now, on that thing though, I do also disagree with Justin that this is the ideal solution. And by the way, I haven't thought I've thought shallowly on this, so it's like I could change my mind in a month. So don't hold me too hard to this. But I don't like the idea of the fee burn, the tail emission plus burn mechanism. Because first of all, uncertainty is just not good. You should have it like supply certainty, I think, is good. But also, if you have a ton of business, right, you have a lot of people trying to use this stuff. Obviously, even in a super scalable system, at some point there's some limits. And we're not talking about a scalable system, of course. But even if there was, there would be some limits. At some point, demand is going to drive up the price because of the constrained supply. So it's going to drive up fees in times of massive usage. But then when you also drive up scarcity with that, like you start burning like a mofo right there, then that drives up the price of the gas even more. So it double crunches up the price. And then it's like, oh my gosh, this is insanely inspected. And then you have people dump off. So I'd rather have a little bit more of like a smooth growth than like the crunch. Unfortunately, the tokenomic design was built in a weird way to make ETH holders rich, I guess, rather than in the short term, rather than in the long term, make them rich by just making the network profitable, because they're like, oh, look at all the burn, our ETH bags are going to be heavy, but then it falls out when you chase away consumers. So I don't like that way of doing things, really. I think they could have done it a little bit of a better way than that, And the reason why they say, oh, well, you want everyone to benefit from when you drive the traffic up. Well, I think you only want the people processing the traffic to necessarily directly benefit. Like you don't need to pay like a, what do they call it? A fee tax onto just random holders or things like that. But also the whole idea is what happens if transaction volume goes too low and you need to sustain security on the network? That's why they have the tail emission. Well, why? First of all, if you had enough business paying for transactions, you would not have to worry about that. And ironically, by trying to cover for that with the mint burn mechanism, you create the crash, the usage crash that then defunds validators or whatever. And also, I'm just not nearly. It sounds like more, the tail emission sounds like it makes more sense for like a proof of work coin, like say Monero, for example, because proof of work costs a lot of money. Like proof of stake costs like, what do they call it? Capital opportunity cost, but it doesn't actually, like, you don't spend a lot of money running validators compared to that. So you can afford to not be super profitable. It's not like as soon as the revenue dips, you're just going to sell all your ETH and dump your validator. Some might, but most won't. So I think it's not really like a critical problem. Like, oh my gosh, no one's using ETH, so therefore the security is going to collapse overnight if we don't put in this tail emission thing. So I kind of think the ETH got caught double hit. There's a little bit of, as far as like the foundation drama, I don't really know too much, but it does seem like a lot of the cypherpunk principles that Bitcoin were based on, Ethereum kind of pioneered the, well, yeah, us too, but we're going to make a couple of compromises sort of thing, which, the slippery slope leads to stuff like, say, Solana or XRP or whatever else. So yeah, that's kind of my overall thing. Ethereum's going to be around for a while, I think, but as far as is it going to be number 2 for a while, I don't know. They got to change some things, and they seem to be in a position where they're not set up to change those things.
Right. That was going to be my next question. Like next 5 years, how are you seeing the ETH community shake out? Because I'm quite bearish on the Ethereum community, because like they got a lot of benefit that they still haven't really come to terms with just by being the second project while Bitcoin was dying in the blocks hash war, right? That was how they got their start, and they've run that quite a way. And then they had the merge, and that was really hype, and they spent 5 years doing all the engineering to do it. They shipped it. It didn't go wrong, but now they're having these problems with the inflation. So it did kind of go wrong, just not with a technical bug, but more with a conceptual, the idea was bad. And now they're sort of casting around like, what are we going to do next? And so Justin Drake has been talking about his beam chain idea, which they're renaming to something else, which to me also sounds like a complete crock of nonsense, but it sounds like they'll spend 5 years working on that. And then at the end, like they don't have too many more lives left. They wasted all this time on the merge. Their competitors have improved a bunch, right? Solana went from haha another ETH killer to holy shit, is this actually going to be an ETH killer? The ETH killer meme inverted itself. And if it's not Solana, well, it could be any of these other guys. Like there's enough options out there, and I just don't feel that they have the same resilience over time that like the BTC community might, just by weight of network effect. Like the EVM network effect has already dissipated so much.
Yeah, it's also kind of funny how ETH's scaling strategy was ETH killers, which just does not make sense at all if you care about ETH, because now it's like Base is one of the biggest ETH killers out there, and it is ETH, but come on. So what if Base just decides to say, you know what, we're in L1 now, we're going to implement some other things, we're going to be in the next Solana or whatever. Okay, well, they're there. You can't stop them. You can't be like, hey, wait, we had a deal. Like, did you though? Like, I don't know. It's kind of interesting how Bitcoin's hegemony is at some point, I think, coming to an end. But what they had, they got rid of it. They got rid of their advantage way less than, say, Ethereum. They were way more rooted in as than 85% of the market cap or more before the big plunge in dominance when ETH kind of started pumping. And their number one use case, as it turns out, we're starting to find out, is to be able to efficiently and trustedly, in a way you could trust, send large amounts of money. And it's just billions of dollars. Bitcoin works great, relatively speaking. And you go down, 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 down. And then just the hundreds of dollars and below, it just doesn't make sense, especially for lots of people. But it turns out the big money isn't the big money. So that will eventually dry up. There's eventually things will shake out, but it didn't really sell out its heart and soul like ETH. ETH had everything will be built on ETH, world computer, whatever else. And also, we're not number one. And so you just go from that point to get arrogant and just say, no, we're irreplaceable. It's no, that's not going to work out for you. So I think that ETH's fall from grace is going to happen. It's already sort of happening, maybe, depending on, maybe I speak too soon. Maybe there's something else. But I do think that it's going to happen easier and faster than Bitcoin's.
Yeah, I mean, I just had a look at, speaking of the Bitcoin dominance, right? You look at this, BTC is currently, I feel like, and I predicted on the end of the year show, that BTC would cap out at about 60% dominance this cycle, which was kind of where it was. It's gone up a little bit. It's gone slightly over. I think it barely hit 61, but I would be surprised if we get that much more dominance out of this cycle, right? So last cycle it was at 70 and the one before at 85, right? So if BTC is at 60, if that's peaked, now ETH is having a terrible time on the dominance. This is usually Ethereum's time to shine, right? ETH is currently only 9.1% of the market cap, with everyone else making up 30%. So it's a very good time to be everyone who isn't BTC, especially ETH, right? That's the reading I get. You got the same point of view on that?
I think so. And I guess I should actually watch ETH closer, because I think this is the point where Ethereum is at a crossroads right now. So I think if Ethereum pivoted back to kind of a big block, on-chain scaling type roadmap, or found a way to enshrine the rollups a little bit more so that it's not like you're just having centralized third parties run all your stuff, to where it's more connected to the network, whatever. If they massively overhauled things, ETH could be back to number 2 solidly, kind of. But because Solana, I think, is, first of all, Solana, and this is one of the reasons why Justin Bonds shills it so much, is because Solana, there's so many things wrong with Solana, but the one thing that's right with it is the absolute poster child for on-chain scaling right now. It is and I don't know if it does it the best. A bunch of dropped failed transactions happen when it to me, I haven't looked too deep into the tech to know exactly why that happens, or how else it could be avoided. It doesn't sound like a good idea. But the point is, they're processing tons of transactions cheaply for everyone, and they're proving you can do it, and they're proving it's a business model too, as far as I think I saw somewhere that Solana was generating more fees total than Ethereum. I by a good margin. I have not verified that data, so someone else check that. But basically, they're proving the big block model works. Now, they cut some corners to get where they're at, as far as like decentralization, as far as like sketchy things like lying about stuff, as far as like basic network stability under peak conditions kind of things. They kind of, so I think that their number 3 spot is not very solid. Like if Ethereum gets to be, you know, like old Ethereum, old school Ethereum, where it just like works and is relatively cheap at massive Solana levels, like Solana's toast. And so I don't think Ethereum's going to go that way, but Solana kind of paved the way for like every big blockchain, as far as Bitcoin was, you know, oh, we can't go past 1 megabyte or whatever, 4 megabyte block weight or whatever nonsense they do with that. It's like, okay, we can't do that. It's too scary. Okay. Ethereum ran into scaling problems and then just didn't scale. And it, like the whole narrative of like 90% of the crypto or 80% of the crypto market cap is L2 scaling is the way to go. That narrative, thanks to Solana, is not there anymore. It's still there, but it's not, except the science is no longer settled, is my point, right? It's not kind of, now you can,
the
now
science is unsettled. I gotta start, we're gonna start that as a meme. The science has been unsettled.
Yes. The science has been unsettled. Now anyone who has a big block roadmap, no one's going to say, well, how will it scale? Now they'll just be like, oh, okay, you're going to do what these guys did. So after Solana, anyone can kind of, you know, the floor is open basically.
Yes, very interesting. We'll see. Okay, so your prescription then for the 5-year ETH plan is if they repivot back to L1 scaling, which I would say they're not going to do because there's too much money in not doing it basically. But if they did, they went all back in on layer 1, fixed it up and tried to sort of fight Solana head on, then they'd come out of it good. But if they don't, in the more likely case, they're going to be a bit wrecked. That's what I'm hearing, yeah?
Yeah, it's kind of weird because EVM has such an overwhelming dominance as far as, you know, a lot of the smart contract space, et cetera. But EVM is not tied to Ethereum really, unless you want to just still have like the grandfather kind of like code base that just, you can't do anything on it because it's too expensive, but it's still builds. Everyone's like, well, we need that around because we're going to need to copy their homework. But kind of like the backport to Bitcoin, to BTC world, where I like, do you remember back in the day, like 2017 era day, everything was Bitcoin based, and now like nothing is. No one's using that code anymore, except for like, you know, the OG projects. But like as far as new things, so yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens with these ones. But I think that it's just like the old tech is going to sort of like fade out over time, and we'll probably see ETH become a footnote faster than BTC, you know, at this point. That's just, if I were to bet money on it, I would kind of bet that at that point.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Makes sense to me. Okay, speaking of BTC then, let's have a look at the biggest news of this week. The Strategic Reserve, the US government put out an executive order establishing a Bitcoin Strategic Reserve consisting of the BTC that they've already seized. So they didn't have to buy it from anywhere. They didn't sell any, or they didn't do anything weird. They just kind of said, well, we've got all this BTC that we stole off Ross Ulbricht, who we just let out of prison for being innocent the whole time. But what if we just said, well, this is ours, and we just renamed it basically to a strategic reserve? So they did that. Then they also created a digital asset reserve. I think that's the right terminology, which is basically all the cryptos they have that are not BTC, essentially. And then they said that they would consider buying, here's the exact wording, they will consider the strategies of Treasury and Commerce are authorized to develop budget-neutral strategies for acquiring additional Bitcoin, provided that those strategies impose no incremental costs on American taxpayers. But then with the US digital asset stockpile, okay, so that one's a stockpile, not a reserve, then they say that they can't buy any more from it, basically, and potentially do sales from it. So the BTC guys all kind of felt like this was a huge win because they did a bit of reading the legalese, tea leaves, and decided that this is foreboding that BTC will be purchased in some roundabout, tax neutral way, whether that was selling gold or stealing it off somewhere else, or maybe mining it, or whatever the hell, whatever way they tried to jam it through, and that all the shit coins were in the digital asset reserve, which is not going to get pumped and is only going to get dumped. So they were all thrilled about it. We have a clip here, Jet, to play of Trump as he is signing this new executive order, and I think his comments on it are quite informative. So let's have a listen.
This is very historic, an executive order establishing a strategic Bitcoin reserve and digital asset stockpile. This is a promise that you made throughout the campaign, and today we're keeping that promise. The reserve will be capitalized with Bitcoin that the federal government already owns, so it won't cost taxpayers a dime. This is like a digital Fort Knox for digital gold. And premature sales of Bitcoin over the past years cost American taxpayers over $17 billion in lost value because we didn't have a long-term strategy.
Right.
Now we do. So.
And this is something you believe in?
100%, yeah.
Okay.
And the whole community believes in it.
Very good. And they made the promise, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Today we're signing.
All right, so there you have it. David Sachs, the new crypto czar, and who was highlighted on this show in the hoax episode, if you remember that one, clearly is the one calling the shots here. Trump's just kind of like, well, we promised this, so we better do it. But if you think this is a good idea, let's get on with it. So it definitely doesn't seem to be necessarily coming from Trump. And I am also skeptical that the BTC only /BTC only approach or whatever, I think that's hoping a bit much. I mean, who knows? But I think the BTC guys are going to get caught off guard when the digital asset stockpile suddenly becomes, well, but we need to stockpile it a bit more, and maybe the reserve is not reserving as much as they thought. It's been set up in this with them separated, and maybe that was a way of appeasing them in the short term. But I would say that the overall financial interests of the market will come to bear with changing, bureaucrats, changing political tides, changing economics. It seems inevitable to me that since basically everything kind of got in via this digital asset stockpile, BTC is not the one true one. That's my take. Joel, what do you think?
Yeah, I kind of agree. That was such a hilarious video, though, because it just literally seemed like, when you're talking to your grandfather's going to buy you some electronic for your birthday. He's like, this is the one you want? This one? Okay. He just doesn't understand what he's doing. He just, all right, I'll do this to make you happy. He doesn't know. He's not even feigning to be like, oh, yeah, seriously. No, he just that one. I'll let him talk. I don't know this shit. Let him talk. It's just so funny. And that's the thing. What people don't fully get is this administration is a coalition administration. They got a group of people together and said, listen, if you vote for this party and this president, etc., you'll get this, you'll get this, you'll get this, and we have a deal. All right, let's go. And to this guy's credit, he's barely been in office 2 months, and less than that actually, and he's given a lot of people the favors he promised, right? The transparent favors he promised. Ross Ulbricht, day one, day 1.5, boom, done. And then it's all these SEC cases being dropped, done. Oh, and cryptos are whatever, and then I'm going to do this strategic reserve thing, and that's one of the biggest asks, because the Maxi Mind virus basically is just saying everyone's going to just buy Bitcoin and it'll go up, and then they don't understand that other people don't have that perspective. And so I'm sure everyone's saying this doesn't make sense to just why are we going to spend a bunch of taxpayer money to buy this one coin of all these assets, and only only the multi-coin people gave millions to the campaign. Only the Winklevoss and Jesse Powell and all them gave millions to the campaign. And then this XRP person, I mean, yeah, they kind of gave a lot to the opponent, but then they quickly switched when they saw where things were going and they tried to save it, and it worked, And then there's this like weird old man who talks about this Cardano thing, who's actually younger than me, but looks like he's like
that's
my
crazy.
grandfather.
I love that. Charles Hoskinson is like somebody
like,
said
he seems smart.
Like LARPing as like a 55-year-old professor when he's like 33 or something. What is going on?
What if he looks like me actually? But then he just always has this weird little like wig on, and he hunches over with his glasses, and he can just take off the disguise. He's like, surprise, But the point is, this guy comes in and is like, oh, well, buy my coin too. And I'm like, all right, fine. And then everyone's freaking out because, and then the taxpayers are freaking out. Oh, we don't want to spend our money on this. So, okay, we'll do without that. They're just trying to they don't care. They just want to do something to make everyone happy so they could go back to the rest of the stuff. And it's funny how the only acceptable option is the least acceptable one. Is the only acceptable option to the maximalists, right? Is the only one that's like insane, which is just like, yeah, let's ignore all the space, all your special interest groups, everything, and just buy this one asset and keep throwing money at it. And then maybe it's going to go down and then you're going to be mocked. So they're not doing that. They're not going to probably buy Bitcoin. They're like, well, let's do this with what we already have. And let's just see, look, we have a strategic reserve. We got it, but we didn't. And then the problem is they didn't want a strategic reserve. They wanted someone to pump their bags. That's just like
which didn't work. It didn't work. The market has crashed. I mean, it's now at 82,000. It was about 90,000, I think, at the time this was announced, and then it sort of dumped to about 85,000, and then the last day or two it's gone down another 4%. It's been to 82 kind of range, so it didn't work. And then there's that's being a bit uncharitable to them. I think some of them were hoping that obviously it would get announced and the price would go up. They're always hoping for that. But I think the Steelman take is their idea that, okay, now we have even more legitimacy. And I think that comes to David Sachs saying it's going to be digital gold in the digital Fort Knox. There we go. All these guys out there who have their fantasy that one day they're going to restore Bitcoin to being a digital peer-to-peer electronic cash system, with covenants or with the Dead Lightning Network or with whatever. They just don't understand. Once you've let the branding get away from you like that, it is never coming back. It is never coming back. They spent all this time shitting on BCH, the ones who stuck with and it's now good because now it's turning around where now people are like, yeah, because there was so many years of confusion. Well, is BTC or BCH the real Bitcoin? Which one's the real Bitcoin cash? But now everybody's basically like, okay, Bitcoin's digital gold. Everyone basically agrees on that. Even the people who want to say, but it's also peer-to-peer cash. But they're lost. It's digital gold. We're going to put it in Sailor's Coinbase account and the ETFs and the strategic reserves, and that's it. Go fuck yourself. That's that's pretty much how it's panned out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of weird because, first of all, we have this strategic reserve now that was kind of signed in. I know it doesn't feel very bull markety, but this is the bull market top year traditionally.
Exactly.
Yes. And so 4 years from now, an election cycle, the way winds have changed, I kind of feel like Team Red will probably get in again, but there's a possibility they won't. And if they don't, then the first thing's going to be you have this asset at the top that's now crashed 40% or whatever it will be down by then. And then they're just let's get rid of it. And then just that might happen. Again, I heard it
here first. That's it.
Think
nobody's predicting that. And we're not even predicting that, but it'd be funny if it did happen. Yeah.
But
Democrats in 4 years, dump all the strategic reserve.
If you want, so when you're talking about what is Bitcoin is a complicated thing, even today. Even BTC today is a complicated thing as far as what is it used for? What do people value out of it? All that stuff. There's a lot of things that go into that. But as far as the adoption roadmap of Bitcoin, it was lots of things. And then after the block size war, it started to be, well, anything that L2 scaling, well, then not as a complement, everything else is a shitcoin. And it starts to get fewer and fewer things. And then, well, L2 transactions, people don't, that's done. No one talks about that anymore. No one talks about programmability. And like the NFT era was just like super controversial internally and for like 2 seconds. The one thing that Bitcoin has always had, the big adoption angle has been people will buy it at a higher and higher level. And so the president of the US is the highest level imaginable today. And so that's kind of like topped out unless something crazy happens where like you got a guy who's too old to understand. He's just not going to care, right? It's not going to happen. So we're at this thing where all these things, El Salvador is going to keep buying, Sailor's going to keep buying, you know, the US government's going to buy. You aren't bullish enough, which I have to say the only thing that's going up is the percentage usage of caps lock in maximalist tweets these days. It is off the charts. Everyone's desperately pumping. And so you get all this stuff. So the US government's not going to buy probably. In fact, maybe they'll diversify their strategic reserve into Cardano or something and make everyone lose their minds. That would be fun. But so no one's buying there. El Salvador, according to them, are not going to buy anymore, depending on who you believe. We'll get into that later, I'm sure. Sailor's stopped buying because he's kind of running out of dry powder. He's running out of like shuffling around MicroStrategy to get people to just give him free money. Everyone's running. The only one who's buying Bitcoin is the Bybit hacker. So yeah, and that's over. So where else are we going to have this mega buying action? And it's not like, can't just sit there and be useful for whatever it's useful for. The narrative means you have to keep bigger and bigger institutions buying. It's just like the next little, you know, the bigger bump next, which, you know, in case anyone jumped in later, I do have a little bit of a sniffle. So I'm not doing this because I've been on the Sailor stuff. But anyway, so it's just going to keep going. It's kind of reached its ceiling, and it doesn't mean it's not going to go up anymore, but it's, in my opinion, unless we have big things change, it'll just extend out where now some U.S. state treasuries will be like, oh, we'll maybe buy some or something. Some governments, some institutions, it'll just sort of like horizontally flow out. But the maximalism part is over. Like you cannot get higher than that, especially you could not convince the president of the U.S. to be a maxi. He doesn't care, but he's in anything who anyone will fund my campaign for sure, including that weird old guy, fake old guy. But then you get to like, there's just nowhere to go. There's no Lightning Network is around the corner. Oh, this institutions are coming. They're already here. You know, governments, you know, you're not bullish. Not like we're kind of like it. And it doesn't, it's kind of a weird because everyone wants to be like, Bitcoin's going higher, it's going to pump, or Bitcoin's going to crash. And it's a hard line to take to be like, nah, we're just kind of like we reached cruising altitude.
Yeah, carry on. Yeah, well, that's right. I agree. Well, I think it will be. Yeah, it'll just be kind of slowly trickle down. Like, do you think that there's going to be a big run up in the rest of this year? You know, I was feeling, you know, pretty good about the fact that I said at the end of last year, you know, this bull run's going to underperform. Everyone's been waiting all 2024 into 2025. It's going to be mega, $250,000, $300,000. We're not even close. The US government has just made about as good of an announcement as you could possibly get, and the price is at $80,000. Like, when I started this show, the BTC was what, like 33 or 35,000 dollars, you know, and all that's happened between there in 4 years of how far it's come with quote unquote legitimacy. Mm-hmm. Like, I agree with you. What's the next thing? Like, at some point, the institutional grind and the money, it just grinds to a halt, and they would have to actually get some peer-to-peer fucking adoption, ironically, which is the one thing they're not doing. No money essentially is going into that. The protocol hasn't upgraded in years. What about the protocol stuff? Do you see Taproot Wizards getting OpCat through? Do you see these CTV guys doing it? Nothing's going to happen there, right?
Well, yeah, I don't think those things are. Well, I've not been paying close enough attention, but I think that there's too much disincentive to do anything new because to a certain extent, like obviously the maxis don't like to change things, but yeah, citation, big asterisk on that one, but we all know. But the thing is, there's no need to change anything because it doesn't help institutions to adopt it easier right now. It's not like, well, the
makes it worse, actually.
Yeah.
If they feel like we're going to get rugged by some fucking protocol upgrade that we don't understand.
Yeah, like no one's saying, like, the government of Russia is not waiting, not saying, you know what, we need some OpCat before we feel comfortable buying this and have it. That's just, no one's waiting for that, right? So, and I have to say, any innovation in Bitcoin, BTC, any innovation that they've attempted in their direction of things has been punished. All the Lightning stuff, oh my gosh, all the hype, wrecked. It didn't do it. It just like fell on his face and it hurt them, I think. And then all the, what do you call it? The cashew fediment, no one even cares about that stuff. But that
was a flash in the pan. That was like 1 year. Just everybody was shilling that. Now they've forgotten about it, right?
What I liked about it,
etc. It's done.
What I liked about it is it completely like ruined the SEO for Amari's coin. Because now you just look up eCash and it's all this custodial crap. And then it's like, no, but there's an actual block. Sorry, it just ruined the SEO. So unfortunately, that's just what happened. But the thing is, every way that Bitcoin's gotten ahead has been getting bigger entities, institutions, things like that to want to invest in it, to buy it. None of the technical stuff has gotten it anywhere. And so they're almost like, why try something else that we're going to hype up and it's going to not go anywhere and it'll hurt us? Let's just focus on what we're good at, which is moving around massive amounts of money and getting, companies and billionaires and stuff to like speculate on it. And let's just focus in on that. So that's why I don't think it's going anywhere. Now, I wrote an article called Avoiding the Bitcoin Death Spiral, which kind of goes into, it's a very realistic, I would say, I don't mean accurate necessarily. I think it's probably accurate, but I could be wrong. But I'm saying like a realism type based take on where things could go, because at some point you do need to feed the transaction fee beast, or you do need to otherwise subsidize mining, which again, enough countries start to have enough Bitcoin reserves, you're going to start to say, hey, why isn't the taxpayer subsidizing mining farms for the security of everyone? And then you get down that path. So they're going to have to do something. If people want to use Bitcoin as a unit of account of any kind, as some sort of a store of value, whatever you want to call it, they're not going to do it through Bitcoin native solutions or whatever they call that. The approved L2s. They can't do tech to save their lives. But like a token on other chains, maybe that could work. And if they're actually decentralized, you will actually have to like move the Bitcoin on chain to a certain like threshold signature vault or something to then mint tokens on top of it or whatever. And so maybe the shuffling around from different pools, like let's just say that BCH has a big BTC token pool bridge mechanism. And then it's like, Avalanche has one too. And then at some point there's more demand on one side than the other, and then someone has to move some Bitcoin out there, and that transaction fee goes to the miner. And if there's enough of that going on, then it limps along for a while and it's fine. So
ironically, Gavin Andreessen wrote about this, right? In 2014 or 2015, he wrote an article which was saying there's a case where BTC just becomes the backing used for everything else. And then he said, yeah, guys, that's kind of a fail, because the whole point of Bitcoin was that we would keep the 21 million. And if you have enough of that stuff going on, then you've essentially added inflation, right? So,
yeah, the thing about Bitcoin as it is today, right, is it is sort of akin to a digital gold in some ways. But the advantage of it over, say, gold, sorry, Peter Schiff, but is that you can verify that the money is there. Everyone can see it. And then there is just enough programmability or technical whatever to be able to tie assets to that in a way. So you could create a completely open source transparent protocol. Like one of my favorite ones is TBTC, or the Threshold project. They have a threshold Bitcoin thing that anyone can trustlessly mint. You put your Bitcoin in, mint on Ethereum or whatever, do whatever, and then burn it and get it back out again, redeemable for the actual stuff. So the more there's things like this around, I think that sketchy things like custodial Coinbase, like how much do they have, all that stuff, I think that that's going to be less attractive. So the fake Bitcoin, you know, the paper Bitcoin thing, I think is going to be a thing, clearly. As any of these like bank run type things that like the Monero people and Bitcoin cashers and everyone else has done, sort of proves that why would they be scrambling if they're whatever. But I think it'll limp along for a while. Like the catastrophic crash of Bitcoin is probably not going to happen for a while. If it does happen, I wrote a post, a very short post. It's not an article, you don't have to read it, but basically about why Bitcoin is still number one, which the biggest one is it has unmatched liquidity to where you could, like, where else can you just move like 1.4 billion from the hack and just do stuff with it? Like, where is there enough liquidity to just do that? And so that's like, they use things like Thorchain, for example, to swap all the ETH to Bitcoin. Now, they didn't gain any privacy. That's where the whole laundering thing, like there's no laundering happen. You didn't obfuscate or make legitimate the funds at all. Everyone saw it go in and go out as Bitcoin exactly here, but they were just accessing a much larger liquidity pool. And I might even argue that Ethereum liquidity is not that great because so much of it is tied up in things. So much of it is pledged in validators or locked up in contracts here and stuff. So they're just like, I want the liquidity. So Bitcoin has massive liquidity. Something else will have to approach it in liquidity size before you start chipping away at that. But the other thing is just like the trust in how it works. And when you get down to the roots of it, it doesn't work. Like, we know it doesn't really work that well there, but at the higher levels of Bitcoin's original design shines through enough at the $1,000 plus level where you can still relatively cheaply transact in the several $1,000 level, and then it will go through in a faster than most TradFi stuff, and it will be secure, and no one is 51% attacked Bitcoin yet that we know of. So it's been doing that for the longest amount of time. So there's that massive amount of trust in the system, and there is something to be said about the whole, like, no hard fork thing. Obviously, I don't, as a net, I don't think it's worth it. But the benefit is of, like, some boomer who doesn't update their software in a decade will still be able to, like, access this stuff. It won't be like, oh my gosh, it's giving me an error. All my gold wouldn't give me an error. So where I see that element shaking a little bit are two things: the security budget. Once the halvenings keep happening and there just isn't money to come back in, then people have to start like, oh no, it's not as secure anymore. Oh no, what do we have to do? But also the whole quantum computing thing, which I think is again, as someone who's not an expert in this whatsoever, I personally think it's a little bit overblown as far as how threatening it is, because people will have to migrate funds and change address and cryptography schemes and stuff at some point. You're going to need to do it, but it's going to be, I don't think it's going to wipe out a lot of stuff. However, just the fact that the shit show of Bitcoin is going to be crazy to watch, where now all of a sudden you're like, hey, all that money in addresses, especially the super old stuff, especially Satoshi's hoard, is going to be up for grabs if you don't move it. And most people don't move it. And a lot of Bitcoin's market cap is based on dead coins that just will never be moved again. And once a hacker starts dumping all those on the market, oh my gosh, that's going to be crazy. Once you start hacking those old addresses and migrating funds out. And of course, you could do something like say, after a certain period of time, any funds left in old addresses are frozen forever. You could do that. But that, again, it's just like a no-win scenario for a super old, stable kind of vibe that Bitcoin has. You just can't you're not going to come out there any better. And so I think at that point you start to get shaken up. Then investors start looking around for other things. What else has good liquidity? And this ecosystem has all this stuff. And then you start to like see like the slip down the rankings at that point. That would be my prediction. And when are quantum computers going to be out there and powerful enough? Some people say 3 years. I think more people say 5 to 10. I've heard 10 to 20. Yeah. But so somewhere in the 3 to 20 year range, that's when the fireworks start. So yeah, basically that's what's going down probably.
Yeah, I'd say probably 5 years if I had to guess. But you want to be ready in 3. Basically, or at least very close to ready. The BTC community, they're way out of practice on doing upgrades. So I don't know how well they're going to handle that, even if the idea of quantum resistance isn't that controversial,
Yeah, I've been told BIP 360, I think, is where all the action's at with the quantum stuff. Basically all the UTXO based stuff will be looking into that. So I'll have to verify that after the show that it is 360, but yeah, look into that.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on that one. My community comment of the week, which sort of touches a bit on all of this, is from Brett Weinstein, who famous, I don't know, what is he, a biologist and podcast commentator type of guy. He commented this week, I wonder if Elon Musk or anyone else in the Trump administration has read Hijacking Bitcoin, with the photo of the front cover of Hijacking Bitcoin, which is amazing because of visually how many, like this, I think this tweet got over 500,000 views, like how many people would have seen that flashing up on their Twitter feed, and it really just goes to show that this is happening at the same time as the BTC guys are celebrating, we were the chosen ones in our strategic reserve and they don't have the digital assets are irrelevant. But at the same time, the story of the hijacking, like the story of BCH being the answer, is nowhere near big yet, right? But we've got to the point that Bitcoin was hijacked has become a known thing, that outside of those most hardcore circles, that's become sort of the accepted narrative, right? So we've got like to step 1 out of 2. Step 1 is BTC was hijacked, and step 2 is BCH is the answer from my point of view. But we've got there. That first one is already there. BTC was hijacked. That's known, and that's not getting any less known over time, right? And for us, I don't know, it feels vindicating. Do you have a take on hijacking Bitcoin in general? You've got it in the background there. What do you make of all that, right? Was that the biggest story of 2024?
I can't say for sure because 2024 was, it's like, have you ever had a really in-depth lucid dream and then when you wake up from it, you just have like trauma and confusion for the rest of the day because you lived like 3 lifetimes in that dream cycle and you're trying to process what happened and now come to terms that it didn't happen. Or is that just me? But anyway, that was 2024, right? Lots of things happened. So yeah, I think that was one of those, it's kind of funny because I have to say, like, huge fan of Roger, obviously, good friend, love that dude. Bitcoin Jesus, he should always be known as. He kind of became a lot less relevant over the years to the general thing. Like he was everything for Bitcoin for a few years. Then during the block size war, he was like controversial figure number 1. Then with the Bitcoin Cash stuff, he was like, Bitcoin Judas or whatever they called him for like, no, they still very powerful, a very influential, talked about figure. And then when like after the BSV split and especially the eCash split and just doing his own things and his, the nonsense with Mark Lamb and all that stuff. And just like, he just sort of like, and just taking a break, he just sort of faded into obscurity. And I would say a well-deserved obscurity from a positive thing. Cause like who wants the spotlight? Well, not his kind of spotlight. And I kind of thought that he would just continue to be kind of like Antonopoulos, where he was also a massive figure, very important to all of crypto. And he just is, I hear people as of like 2 months ago, like seeing him at conferences and stuff, like he's still around, but he just kind of,
he's in Spain. He's at the moment, he's in Spain. He can't leave and he's potentially
talking about Antonopoulos there.
All right.
My point.
Okay. Is Andreas back on the circuit? I didn't know about that.
I've heard rumor that people have seen him at conferences, not speaking, just listening to talks and taking notes and stuff. And like, so he's still around, but my point is he's gone from the scene. And so when Roger, then he comes back on the scene with his book, and I underestimated the influence of the book. I thought it was just like, all right, here we go again. Like, it's just another round of the drama, the family drama we've all been through for freaking a decade at this point. And so I thought it kind of had that vibe in the beginning, but at some point, the media tour, the fact that he was like talking about Zeno and a bunch of other stuff, and it wasn't like, oh, I'm here to hijack my Bitcoin, my style. You know, the fact that it just seemed more sincere, and then all the legal troubles and like the martyrdom thing. Like, I have to say, like, Roger, he is a very polarizing way of communicating, and that's kind of what was awesome about him, right? But also it's easier to sort of dismiss him, and I think that now that he's off the Hijacking Bitcoin tour, it's really doing a lot better, because now there's people who are just discovering it and being like, oh, look at this thing. And it's not, yeah, well, you're just a Bcash shill scam. Because no, it's just some random person like Brett Weinstein saying like, oh, look at this thing. And it's like, well, you can't pretend like he's a Bcash or whatever. Like, yeah, it's just a random person picking it up. So I think that oddly enough, like Roger's mythical, like martyrdom status right now, right? Bitcoin Jesus on the cross now. You know, again, I don't want to get too weird with this stuff, but the parallels are pretty obvious. Now that he's not advocating for this holy text, as it were, now that other people are discovering it and the word speaks for itself, now it's kind of entered into a different mythos. So, and also it's interesting because most of the modern people the modern non-crypto people who have adopted the message of Bitcoin and stuff like that are in this kind of freedom-oriented world. And this is their message. This is a message that resonates with them. And Roger Ver's being politically persecuted with this lawfare. Again, the sitting president of the United States had the exact same thing, type of thing happen to him. He pardoned Ross Ulbricht. That was a big part of his thing. Ross immediately turned around as advocating for Roger to be pardoned.
Yes.
All this is like in a position where when the maxis don't have the narrative at all. And I don't want to I don't want to overly be like, ooh, look, they lost. But if you look at all the stuff, like no one's listening to these people. Like it's all the big influencer people, or on the right, whether it's a Tucker Carlson or whatever, Alex Jones or people like that, they're just like sliding right into this. And then you just see like angry Dan Held on every comment thread somewhere. But like,
no, he's a liar. I know what he did.
But no one's listening to him. Like I've not heard any of these people be like, oh wow, I'm sorry. I thought I heard there's now saying he was like a scammer. I got to look into this more. Like I've not heard anyone say that. Everyone's just like, oh, cool book, share it around. And then,
but it's self-protecting in that way, you know, because there's so many overlapping elements to it where the book says that it was all about censorship, disinformation, this kind of social media hijacking. There was all kinds of underhanded skullduggery and etc. So then when somebody says hijacking Bitcoin is all lies, it's very easy to be like, well, is it though? Or is this just proving what it said? Because if you want to dispute hijacking Bitcoin, which is clearly not like very, vindictive or sort of biased based on, there's a little bit of his opinion at the start and at the end kind of thing. But most of it is just like, look, here's the facts and here's all the citations. So it makes it very hard to say, well, this is all lies, when the book is about a lot of people are going to lie a lot of the time, and you've really got to take that seriously and just not fall for it, right? So they're having a hard time fighting against that perception, because it's also so easy as well to just go in the comments and just say, so what are the lies? And then there's just no response to that. And that silence is just deafening, right? That's what we've been seeing a lot of at the moment, I'll say, is just because, especially like on Twitter, even if you're the person replying and you only get a fraction of the views, that's because the view count is based on people who like clicked on the bigger tweet, But a lot of people will have still sort of seen in the comments a couple of people saying, yeah, what lies? And then there's just nothing. There's no, here's the article that says that hijacking Bitcoin is full of lies with a point-by-point breakdown. Here's the YouTube video. Here's the Adam Back tweet thread. Doesn't exist. The only thing that there is read The Block Size War by Jonathan Beer, which, one, everybody should do, but two, if you read that and hijacking Bitcoin, that like confirms it, really, because it mostly backs up what is said, and they both agree there was loads of censorship. They both agree that Roger was like centrally involved in what was going on, and etc. And so it just confirms what he's saying. Yeah.
Yes, and I have to say, like, for full PSA, I have not really read either book. I've seen some excerpts from Hijacking Bitcoin, but I was there the whole time.
Scammer. You've got it in the back. I haven't even read it. What a clout-chasing influencer.
Yes, I don't own any Dogecoin either, and I only occasionally enjoy Vegemite. So yes, you're right. I am a little bit of a scammer. So all the stuff in my background.
You lived it, mate. You lived it.
The Bitcoin Takeover magazine in the background, I wrote an article in there, and so obviously I know what's in there, but then other than that I've read like one or two, and I'm sorry, just so many hours in a day. But yeah, the point is, from what people have told me, and I do have friends who have open-minded friends who have just not known which one was right and just sat down and read both of them, and from what I've heard, relatively objectively, first of all, hijacking Bitcoin is way more compelling in the argumentation of, as far as like less sensationalist, more fact-based, more documented, more just like neutral, even though it's definitely not a neutral book, but it just comes across a lot more like that. Whereas Block Size War comes off a little more wishy-washy. But also, as far as I understand, no one really thinks the Block Size War is a good book. Like, no one heard about this book until Roger had one, and everyone's like, oh, we need to give them something else to read. But like, everyone likes this book, right? Everyone's talking about it. Everyone, oh, fascinating read. This is a good one, whatever. But this other book is like not the same caliber of book, from my understanding. I don't want to talk any.
It's not even close.
The person who wrote it,
but it is
be a lovely individual. I don't know.
But it's the book that they all read. Like, everyone who got into BTC in 2017 and 2021, who became these big laser eye type of guys, that was all their Bible. And that's just why it's so ironic that Hijacking Bitcoin has come out. And finally, after, years later, there was a counter argument. And now it's actually become on them to say, read both. Because it kind of gets to what you're saying. By default, if people are going to read one of the two, it's going to be Hijacking Bitcoin, because Hijacking Bitcoin is just resonating at such a higher level and at where we're at in the whole cryptocurrency.
Yeah, you have to say that's
right?
Such a Hail Mary. Like, at the point where they're like, but read this one too. It's just like, you're toast. First off, no one's going to read both, because this is the sexy book. The other one is just like, no one, it's some nerd nonsense. No one cares, right? But also, so there's just the massive discrepancy of who's going to read which book. But then also, it's just like, well, please, maybe like, what are they really holding out for? That, like, Brett Weinstein is going to like read this, but this makes sense, and then he's going to go to the Block Size War and like actually read through it and be like, I should run my own node. Like, no, it's not going to work that way. It's just not going to happen. So I don't think it's going to change a single mind. All it does is cast doubt on that this is the only point of view, because obviously it's not, and I don't think it should be promoted as the only point of view, but it is, and here's the thing, all the action is around, like, you don't have swarms of people who promote hijacking Bitcoin or into things like Bitcoin Cash and Zano and all the other things like that. You don't have these people talking about, no, get out of the strategic reserve, it's a scam, this and that, or like, you don't have, they're fine. They're just letting things happen. So it's not like the narrative is just, it's broken out of that binary, the red versus blue, or the orange versus green coin binary. It's kind of broken out. It's free. It's there. Idea whose time has come. And the thing is, I have to say, with like the maximalist narrative, we're at narrative death right now, as I've mentioned before, about like it's the death of the It doesn't mean it's going to be over, but in 5-10 years, I don't think you'll in 10 years from now, I don't think you'll find any more Bitcoin maximalists. Really, not really. Like, not the same way. The same creature won't exist, because I remember the 2017 era. It was kind of a battle, and obviously the behind the scenes battles is very much more sinister, but the battlefields where, the foot soldiers on both sides of any conflict are usually decent-ish people, right? Or neutral, and just caught up on one side of the war or the other. It was kind of like the business people versus like the cypherpunks, and like the cypherpunks were on the small block side, which, it's kind of a far cry from where they are now, but that's kind of where it was, is, well, more technical arguments than like just make the blocks bigger. It's like, well, but nuance of this, and you got decentralization, everyone should run their own UASF. Well, there's all this like technical stuff. And then then all that started to fail as those kinds of technologies failed. And it just got distilled into like the pseudo orange coin worship thing, and these increasingly more abstract concepts, whereas like the financial freedom for all is a very easy to understand concept, I guess. And so now it's like, whatever nerd arguments, no new people are going to appreciate them. No one's going to be like, well, perfect digital scarcity stores energy, all this weird siphoning nonsense. No one's going to be like, oh, that makes sense. Like, no, we're done past that age. And so now, as far as which side makes more sense, it's like, oh, Bitcoin is a freedom technology. Then, it was hijacked. And then it wasn't hijacked because all this maxi nonsense no one even understands. It's like that versus without that. So it's like, it isn't hijacking Bitcoin versus block size war. It's hijacking Bitcoin versus not hijacking Bitcoin, I guess. So like the maxi side of it is not in the debate anymore. It's just, is this true or is it, I guess, not true? But the maxi side is not true.
Nobody thinks it's not true. It's only, nobody is like, this doesn't make sense, or like, I don't understand it, or nothing like that. The only people who say it aren't true are the people who hate it, people who hate it, people who hate it, people who hate it, people who hate it.
Oh, they got to him. Silence in the message. Hey, I'm more than happy shortly. Yeah, I'm more than happy to filibuster while Jeremy's internet gets back. But it's just it is true. And there we go. Are you back? Oh, you're muted though. But
I cannot hear. Oh, wait, that's there we go. Let's try that.
Oh no,
still can't hear you.
They're silencing you, man. So the next, Steve Patterson, Roger Ver's next book, Silence and Jeremy. Wait for it. I'll buy it. I'll be on the shelf right next to this censoring thing. But yeah, so the narrative has definitely gotten away. It's not a Bcasher narrative. It's just a narrative. Like I've seen, obviously, Zano people because of the Roger connection, whatever. Obviously, Bitcoin Cash people. Obviously, a bunch of Dash people. In fact, the guy who runs the Dash.org, does a lot of the Dash.org like support ticket site, was like, as soon as it came out, he's like, can you get Roger to sign my copy? I love this dude. I've been whatever, like forever. And then like a week later, he was unfortunately, arrested and all that stuff. So I could never do that. But the point is like the Dash people love, the Monero people love this book. They're sharing it everywhere. Like Litecoiners are a little more, I haven't seen them share it as much. They're much more, because it's kind of like they were around when the hijacking happened and didn't really do anything about it. So it's kind of hard to do that. But most people are sharing the book. Like the only people who hate that book are maxis, and the rest of the crypto world, including a lot of like BTC people. So who aren't maxis, I guess, who are whatever. So yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely the narrative that ran away, and
it's never coming back. Yeah, it's never coming back. It only just struck me, and I want to move on, but that it's orange. The book is orange, which is so brilliant because it's been such a thing for all of the BTC history, like orange coin, it's such a distinctive, unusual color, and it stands out because it doesn't usually really combine well with other colors in designs and stuff like that. And so it's been the orange coin. And then the fact that Hijacking Bitcoin is not like gray or blue or something, it's like this big orange book. And now the words hijacked, hijacking Bitcoin and the orange color are just kind of tied together, right? So I think it's done a ton of good work there. Amazing work with the cover and everything. All right, I want to move on. So on the, was it the last? No, the one before the last episode, so 142, we talked to Fiendish and Emergent about the BCH community starting these BCH Bank Runs, where we try and blow up a custodial exchange and or pump the price by everybody doing a concerted withdrawal into self-custody. So we had the first round of it on the 1st of March. It was actually a pretty good success. Everyone was quite interested in it. It got quite a lot of reshares and people talking about it. And even on the day, it kind of, the price dropped a little bit from $318 to $312. But in the following week, we mooned 35% against the market to move up back into the top 20 again. Now that might be a complete coincidence, but there was no other seeming news that would have prompted that. So the next one will be on the 15th of March. It'll be the 1st and 15th. So 15th of March and then 1st of April. So listeners to the show, you can all prep your exchange withdrawals for that day. But what do you make of this, Joel? Do you think that the BCH community is big enough and aware enough, on the ball enough, that we could actually start cyclically pumping the price by all doing custodial exchange withdrawals on the same day and then eventually causing a meltdown? Or either way, we just get a bunch of exposure and marketing? What do you think?
Well, first, could you explain in like one quick sentence the value proposition from a price point standpoint? Is in why would you expect this to pump the price?
Well, if everybody coordinates their withdrawals on the same day, even if you have the same amount of liquidity, over 2 weeks as on one day, if you put it all on one day, the liquidity takes time to generate, right? So if there's a huge hit, it's going to spike the price more than if you spread it out over, if you like DCA'd basically.
Yeah, so basically it's just like a
shock
liquidity
to the system. Yeah,
scarcity in the liquidity system.
Yeah, especially with custodial exchanges.
Yeah, that's where it gets interesting because unfortunately L2 scaling won in terms of most of what is used in crypto is like paper trading. And so we have some things like Thorchain out there that work well for decentralized trading, but like they've had a rocky last couple of years. We're not at the point where we can just get rid of centralized exchanges yet. And I do think there's just a lot of like paper, because liquidity is expensive, right? As far as having it on hand and being able to move large amounts of money. And it's always like, it's kind of like, it's the thing that killed the Lightning Network really is liquidity. It's bound by liquidity. And so it definitely helps. I'm of two minds of this. So I would say my overall prediction or attitude towards this is I don't know. I'm kind of in the fence because on the one hand, I do think self-custody is great, and especially coordinated efforts like that make sure liquidity is stretched to a certain amount. On the other hand, it's a little antagonistic towards exchanges. And
that's kind of the point. I feel like we've got to embrace our attitude of everybody hates on BCH. Binance won't publish their proof of reserves. Fine, fuck you guys. If that's how it's going to go down, you want to play hardball, then let's do it.
Yeah, so that's the thing is we're seeing a lot of this stuff, not to drag it back into politics, in the current like U.S. administration's negotiating tactics. They're very aggressive. And do you get what you want out of it? You can also backfire. So I think it's probably a good idea as long as you have enough people demanding to use BCH. So therefore exchange is gonna be like, oh God, I got to get more liquidity to keep everyone's withdrawals going, but that they're still happy. So they're not like, you know what, just get rid of the shit coin. And then they delist it. And then now it's like,
I can't really see that happening. Maybe. That would be pretty extreme, though. If it's like, we're going to delist BCH because they've started withdrawing from our exchange that we claim has full backing. Like, that would probably just prove our point. Now, I'm not a fan of the Monero thinking, which is, we got delisted, shows how resilient we are. No, you definitely want to be listed and not delisted. But at the same time, if the exchanges are delisting you because you're doing too many, self-custody withdrawals, then that's a W.
Yeah, and definitely with banks, you don't have perfect liquidity, right? There's, especially in the US, I mean, I don't know how screwed up banks are. I assume that they're just as screwed up, but the point is the banks don't have everyone's money at any one time, especially nowhere near the neighborhood of that. So there are banks that restrict withdrawal amounts to very small amounts, like a few $1,000s, generously speaking, just because they don't have that around. And, a lot of that all of the talk about, money laundering, or what is this for? Are you being scammed? All this for your own protection stuff is a cover for, we don't want you doing this because we just don't have the money, which is funny because they actually had an incident in the last few weeks where a major platform I was talking to was it didn't even get a courtesy message, was just one customer got over, hey, we're going to remove support for Dash to these regions. I'm like, what the hell? So I talked to them and they're like, well, we need for these regulatory reasons, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, well, that's not true because we speak with the top blockchain lawyer in the EU and we have a 44-page legal opinion letter that works perfectly well on it. And then they're like, well, yeah, but maybe liquidity too. Or they dropped that in there. And I'm like, interesting. And then within a couple of days, they just reversed the decision because I hit them with enough other things, which, don't want to get too into that. The point is, it kind of dropped that nugget in there that yeah, it's not always about the things they say it's about. It's it's the liquidity. And so, the thing is, most exchanges, I don't think have all, I'm not going to FUD everyone, but this broad stroke saying this, but I think it's reasonable to assume that most cryptocurrency exchanges have periods where they don't have 100% of liquid customer funds. I don't mean customer funds, but liquid customer funds. And so, for example, with Bybit, right? They lost, small round of applause for Bybit, not because they lost all this money.
Yeah, they didn't blow up. They somehow are still going.
This is every Mt. Gox, FTX, all these big things just wiped out the crypto industry at the time. This was orders of magnitude bigger and no one cared. It's that's impressive how well they just.
But does that mean we're more decentralized, or does that mean that the cover-ups have just got bigger and better and we're going to pay for it down the road when something else? I mean, we're not really going to pay for it in BCH, better. But everyone, yeah.
I think they handled it better. I don't know their whole payment plan or whatever, but as far as I know, everyone still has the expectation to be able to have the ETH that they lost on the exchange. Meaning, if I had $8,000 in ETH, I should probably be able to withdraw it even after this hack. I think they covered the deposits very quickly. They scrambled for some loans and some other capitals, or I know exactly what they did. Again, I'm ignorant on this thing, so please don't roast me. But they figured out how to plug the hole. But because it's a centralized exchange, that's not a big of a problem because they just have to make sure that whenever down the road people do want to get their money off exchanges, if the ETH community did this right now, that would if you want to start the bear market a year early, you want to start the bear market a year early, let's go. Man, that would be horrible because people would be scrambling for, they don't have it. They said they got a deal and then they got to explain, no, the deal is we got financing this thing and blah, blah, blah over the time. And it's but I want my ETH now. Oh, well, we don't really have it now, but if you wait a month, and then everything crashes. We don't want that. Let's enjoy a half bowl for another year, right? But the point is, yeah. So what it does do is it increases, when you increase the price, that's because you increased the cost of servicing BCH on these exchanges. It's the two are the same thing, right? You pumped the coin by increasing the price to support BCH on exchanges. The only thing you have to be careful with is if the value proposition shifts where some people it costs too much to do this, we're just going to delist, which again, for something as established and universal as BCH, I think is a pretty low risk, but it's just always to think about. But over time, I do think that a proof of, I might try some of these things myself, but just like some free brainstorm on that, rather than just a proof of keys, there could be a whole event that you partner with, you share your hardware wallet referral code or whatever, and everyone buy a hardware wallet and self-custody and do promotional things along with. So it's not just a screw the exchanges, it's a self-custody festival almost. And
that's the idea. Yeah. And I think, the original idea that we came up with on the episode was still once a month, but I sort of feel like that's kind of a bit even with 2 weeks, I'm feeling like I'm ready to go again. Let's go. So I think every 2 weeks, it's just a good time. You have a day, you remind everyone self-custody, you keep that culture strong, you make some memes, you do whatever. Maybe we'll find ways that every 3 months, we'll have a bigger one or something. I don't know how it's going to play out. But even just the fact that we did it one time, a lot of people were kind of like, well, this is pretty cool. And it was just literally, I made a tweet and a couple social media posts and that was it. It seems like the price went up afterwards. Again, that could be total coincidence. But now we have that's data point 1. We run it again, do it twice in April, do it twice in May, including one day that will be on the 15th when Bliss is on. So that's even more perfect. Obviously perfect by design, that then there'll be more reason for people to be tweeting and getting attention onto it. And that if it just builds up into a thing that every single 2 weeks the BCH community is just doing this like clockwork, eventually it's going to get viral and noticed enough that the exchanges have to respond. And then that's even better, because then everyone's like, what do you mean the BCH community is doing a GME style, short seller destruction plan? That's pretty credible for the BCH community to be doing that, I think. So I don't know. Yeah, we'll see.
Also, beyond the exchange thing, I think it's just a proof of pulse, right? Where you have, not to be confused with that Richard Hart stuff, but proof of proof that you have community, still alive. I noticed that anytime something big happens, you see people flooding back into the community channels. And whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, it's always a good thing in some way, because it
no
gets
such
the
thing as
community
bad
back
marketing
together.
Type of idea, yeah.
Yeah, or bad community engagement.
Bad publicity, yeah. No such thing as bad publicity, they say, yeah. All right, well, anyway, we'll see how this plays out, but I'm looking forward to it. And the next one, 15th of March, and then after that, 1st of April Fool's Day, even better. So set your watch to that, prep yourself up with some fiat, or if you do a regular DCA, switch it to be on those days or whatever, and we'll see how it plays out, whether or not we can do it again. If we do it again, that's going to be crazy. If we did the first one and we went from rank 23 to 18, if we do it and over the next week BCH goes from 18 to 16 or to 15, the hype is going to start rolling. Everyone is going to be like, wow, maybe this is actually it. So anyway, let's make the next one a good one, 15th of March. Okay, we talked a bit before about El Salvador. Now this one, I also am not really able to summarize, because I can't really figure out what's going on. Basically, El Salvador signed some kind of a deal with the IMF where they got a bunch of loans and money from them in exchange for this agreement that they made, part of which was that they wouldn't basically buy more Bitcoin, which is a weird situation because Nayib Bukele has made such a point of saying the IMF are trying to screw us over, we don't need your money, we've got our BTC stash, we're good. Anyway, that all proved out to be grandstanding because he did this deal with him. So he did that deal and there was a bit of lashback, and then he kind of said, I don't really care what the IMF thinks, I'm going to keep buying BTC. And then everybody was like, but you just signed a deal with them that you weren't going to do that. So do we not understand the deal? Or if you're just going to tell them, to piss off and just do your own thing, why would you even bother? Why would you sign a deal and then immediately contradict yourself? It doesn't make any sense. So I really have no idea what's going on with this. What do you make of this?
Well, I'll tell what I know. So obviously the Bitcoin law had a very certain way it was constructed, and then they're doing volcano bonds and whatever else, a bunch of stuff. And then with the IMF thing, some of the conditions were it can't be legal tender anymore, so they have reversed that. I don't think anyone's really. There's some people who are pretending that didn't happen, but it did. But then also, it's part of these agreements that we're seeing, and as far as I'm aware, they were signed by the government of El Salvador as well, that you cannot continue to buy Bitcoin at this. And it outlines exactly how, like, basically the only way could be through like forfeiture, kind of like the strategic reserve. It's only like stolen stuff. So it's just
the
very
government specialty.
Yeah, it's like taxation is theft, but this is extra theft.
Theft is theft as well.
Yeah. So where it gets interesting, because narratives are all over the place, right? We see this stuff. We see Homeboy tweeting. So first of all, there's a certain date at which this comes into effect. So both things could be true, where they keep on buying like bandits up until the cutoff date, and then they can't do it anymore. What I really am 99.9% sure is not going on is that they're not just taking the money and then also screwing the IMF over by continuing to go against their stuff. I'm like, that's not going to happen. As far as like the discrepancy, we're looking into like Samson Mao in his infinite wisdom, right? The Blockstream fellow who had me blocked for like 8 years at this point. Which thanks for Elon for unblocking everyone, sort of. So now I can see all the nasty stuff he posts. But so he was like the main point person for negotiating the legal tender and all this other stuff. And he is very upset. And he's very much like, I don't know. They're saying one thing, but they're doing. And then they're fighting with Max Kaiser and his wife and stuff like that, who work for the government of El Salvador, saying, no, that's not true. And then you're like, well, what is true? And then just crickets. So whenever it's always very important who's saying what, not just what's being said, but also who's not saying things. So I do think that just the maxi blustering, here's the other thing about like Bukele and stuff like that. No one should trust politicians. Duh. But also there's something that's been sort of a perspective that I think that a lot of people don't necessarily have, but this is sort of like my upbringing. So like I grew up in the north of Mexico. My father is Mexican, my mother is American. And I kind of grew up on like that 1 foot in each culture kind of situation. And my mother sort of was like an expat, there's a lot of expats around the world. And there's a certain dynamic where you have places that are great places to live, but they're poor. And they need tourist money to come in, and tourists and expats come in and they treat it like Disneyland. They're kind of like really naive and kind of disrespectful of like the locals and their culture and stuff. And treat it like their party zone. And then the long suffering locals just kind of like say nothing about it because they need the money, but they build resentment. And it has the same kind of lifetime colonial undertones, which are really strong in Latin America because there is a class-based skin color gradient in at least Mexico. I'm sure it's the same way in a lot of places where like the more European looking people do objectively get jobs a lot more. And I remember like I used to do Taekwondo in the local town in Agua Prieta in Mexico. And the instructor was kept on trying to hook me up with his daughters because like, oh, this guy's so white. He's so great. And they'd actually say like, oh, he's like as white as his uniform. And he said like, oh, if we all could take a cream, put it to look like him, we would. And everyone's like, yeah, we would. I'm like mind blown, like just how open it is kind of about that. So with Bukele, basically opened up a Cancun in El Salvador, a Bitcoin Cancun, right? Like an amusement park where he just says, oh, gringos, legal tender, no capital gains, come in here, spend your money, come move here. And a bunch of people moved, not knowing anything about the country or the culture or the situation on the ground or anything else. And he got them, right? They're there. And now he's just like, all right, we got that. Now back to business. I need more money than you guys gave us. So we got to get to this IMF loan. And then the other people, wait, what do you mean? You mean the stripper doesn't really love me? And it's like, so that's kind of where we're at. And it's kind of sad. I've seen quite a few idealistic maxis post about how they're leaving now. They moved to El Salvador for all this stuff. Now they realize that it's just like, it's just another country, right? It's like, this isn't Disneyland, right? This is a real country. Yes. You're living here. The stuff you assumed is like, as soon as the legal tender law thing was like over, they just everywhere stopped taking, not everywhere, obviously, but most places stopped overnight taking Bitcoin. There's
Chivo's
reports now
getting wound up, right? You know, like
yes.
just kind of, it's all falling apart. And so, you know, News at 11, the BCH podcast with another W. We had the hoax episode with that guy sitting on the beach being like, fuck, when is this going to work out? And just like we told him in 2021 and in 2024 and now in 2025, it's fine. It's the same as the Lightning Network, another huge W where we told him that it was all going to fall apart. It did. And now, you know, it's all over. But the crying basically is going to be the story there, I think.
Yeah. And it's not like this stuff wasn't real to begin with. It was real, but it was just like it's just like the Trump deal. Like the problem is like the maxis, it depends on which maxi, right? I think a lot of people at the top are smart. They know what's going on. They know all of what they're engineering. But a lot like the average foot soldier maxis too much in their own mentality and mindset to just understand. They think that Bukele is one of them. He's not. He's just the president / dictator of El Salvador right now, who wants to do what he wants to do. And most of what he wants to do is maintain power, but also make his country better off. And the whole, like the average person on the street, from my understanding, really likes him. But 95% of the reason for that is that he cleaned up the gangs and made it safe, and the people aren't getting murdered. They're like, oh, this guy's awesome. Now, is he happy that he played around with the whole like every Starbucks has to do lightning and stuff? Like, I think the locals aren't. It's not popular. And Mark Falzone did some kind of on the ground journalism things about that before, and kind of early on revealed that the locals are just like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what it's about, but kind of like Bukele, but he's kind of playing around with this weird thing, and they just don't care. They just want to live their lives. And I guess the tourism dollars thing, like I'm sure El Salvador is permanently going to be up in tourism after this. Like just the fact that it's safe, you got enough people to go there to do enough blogs about it to where now people are like, oh, I'm going to add that as a potential tourist destination. They've squeezed the maxi thing as much as they can, and now they just like, I don't want to play with you anymore. It's just like, and they were like, what the hell? I thought we were friends. He's like, no, we had a business arrangement. I pumped your coin, right? And he probably still likes.
But that
Bitcoins.
Stopped as well. That's another big part of it. As if the price doesn't keep escalating and escalating and escalating, then the reason for him to be excited, like when the price is going down, I'm buying, just looks desperate rather than euphoric when it's going up, right? So it's the same with Saylor. It's the same with Bukele. It'll be the same with the strategic reserve. Whenever they're like, maybe we should just dump some of this, like it's the same thing. Everybody's just watching these big players with their stash rather than being like, hey guys, let's release a new app, let's release a new protocol update, let's do some peer-to-peer adoption, that's just still
and I have to lament because there was a time when the lightning did bring in new people to Bitcoin, I have to say, in a good way. It didn't end up very well, but it brought in people that cared about spending the stuff, like, digital cashers. And they're always like, obviously for what one could call maybe a little cocked or whatever, but they were all sincere in trying to get this to be like, everyone's going to spend this. Look, it's wall of Satoshi for now, but this is still cool that I'm paying with Bitcoin to here and there. And a lot of that just, those people, the hardcore builders in the Lightning space, just came to El Salvador because they're like, oh, legal tender, I don't have to worry about the capital gains. I don't have to worry about this. You can actually spend it. This is the best place to start growing peer-to-peer cash. And then they got rugged hard. It's not the maxis who got rugged. They kind of did a little bit, but they already got what they wanted. They got price pumps for a while. We wouldn't have gotten to the strategic reserve level without El Salvador, that's for sure. They got what they wanted, and just the deal's over. And even though it's like, well, I'm still going to buy whatever. We'll see what happens. But it's mostly over. But it's the adoption people who got rugged, where now they're there. They invested their time. Some people one guy was even talking about
there,
he got married there. He had like a wife and kid and stuff, and they're all moving back to Europe. And it's just like
he's probably feeling pretty good. He's got a ticket out of there in that case. Maybe it all worked out, you know.
It did work out, but still, it's just sad that because I know I'm not well, but I know of some of these people working on the adoption scene there, and I'm just like, oh man, this is sad that they got rugged. And like, I don't feel bad for the people of El Salvador either, because they got a bunch of annoying gringos, which sucks. But then they got more money out of this. They got more people. They got a safe. I mean, the safe country was something else, but everyone's doing okay except for like the adoption people. And so, and the maxis, I don't know how they're going to sustain if they don't keep buying. That's going to be interesting. But yeah, we'll see.
Well, it's just all coming apart a bit at the seams. Okay, all right. So that's enough about them. We also had this week unusual turn of affairs. We don't need to go into this too much, but there's been a bit of beef between the BCH and XMR community, which is unusual because XMR, like I've said before on the show, probably my second favorite coin. I guess if I had to pick, if BCH didn't exist, I would probably be more aligned with them than anyone else. But they were getting very, very charged up about how BCH is dead, it's not going to work, etc. All the usual stuff. And at the same time as that, there's been some publications of flaws in the Monero privacy model. So it's perhaps not quite as private as they thought. Now, what I have found is that the Monero people are just kind of like, they're just like, it's got to be private, and they cannot see past that no matter what angle, or and they just say money has to be private, and you're like, well, why is Monero number 29 then rather than number 1? And they don't really have an answer to that, because there's actually a lot of things that go into making a good cryptocurrency or a good money in general, and privacy is only one aspect of that. But just like with everything, there's some people who get monomaniacally focused on one aspect and they can't see the bigger picture. So it was just weird that they sort of felt like they needed to argue with us about it, and I guess to some extent us with them, because they just kind of can't really see the trade-offs. And I think in general BCH and Monero are quite synergistic, but things are looking not that great on the Monero scene from what I can tell, because partially this kind of myopic perspective seems to have entrenched itself even further than it already had before. And secondly, as I pointed out to some of them, BCH is probably going to be able to replicate not only their smart contracts, but everyone else's, maybe in about 2.5 years, right? We need to get the VM limits upgrade in Velma in May. The year after that, maybe we get some more of those script upgrades that Jason Dries has been talking about. Then you have a year to kind of actually build it all out. And especially, the cash tokens work that's already ongoing. And before you know it, there'll be BCH privacy coin solutions as good as anything you can get on any other chain. So I feel like they're on a bit of a clock, and I don't know how they're going to pivot and come back from that. But of course, they sort of wouldn't agree. What was your take on any of this? I don't know if you've been following the back and forth.
Yeah, I've been following the back and forth a little bit. But this is, like, I have to say, privacy is something that I have studied more than a lot of things in crypto, and it's an insanely complicated and nuanced topic. And that's one thing that this community is not, is nuanced. And so there's just a lot of black and white going on, and it's very much not that. Basically, just so for the viewers at home, like when I send you a transaction, everyone on the blockchain can see its address here to that address and how much it's for. The first pillar of Monero privacy is confidential transactions, which means you can't see the amounts, which means you see all Monero people and combined have this much. And I sent it, someone sent some, but the amounts are kind of hidden. And there's plenty of other cryptos that have that part. So it's confidential transactions, which hides the amounts, and it's also ring signatures, which means if I send to you, I send to one real person and 15 decoys. It's a ring of 16. And so every time I send, everyone's inputs are sort of like jumbled together with
it's kind of like a cache fusion, like a default cache fusion on every transaction.
Yes, Except the difference with those is those are always like real coins. Like with coin joins,
Yes.
it's always like real coins being swapped around. And it's also at the point of transaction. So when I send to you, it just does a 16 like switcheroo thing, and then there you go. And basically there's a couple of different attacks that were used. And historically, there have been so many problems with for example, the ring size, like how much data those transactions use up, and they use a mathematical thing called bulletproofs to get it really small. And then there was lots of decoy selection problems. So, for example, I believe if you send, I don't believe you can resend a Monero transaction after receiving it unconfirmed until it has some certain amount of confirmations, because if you do, then the first decoy or the first will be very likely to be the real one, the real transaction. So for privacy reasons, just it doesn't work that way. There's been all kinds of different things. It's been like plugging the leaky holes of the boat for years because it's a very complicated problem to solve. But basically, this off-speed attack, or the, what do they call it? The map decoder attack, I think is the other name for it, basically uses statistical analysis to just look through everything and narrow down the possibility to 4.2 from 16. So now Waldo, so I want to give a shout out to Duke Leto, who is, I think he's the head developer of Hush. It's a privacy crypto, but he's contributed to Zcash before. He's done a whole bunch of other privacy stuff. And he's the one who wrote this thing that when I wrote about it, then it started to get some traction and stuff. But he calls it the like Waldo hiding in a crowd of 4.2 people. And so if you combine that with a flooding attack, which is basically you flood the network with transactions. And so now you, the attacker, know, like out of the 16, whatever, like, oh, 4 of those are mine, so I can just write those off, and then use statistical analysis for the rest. They are able to get this down to a ring size of 1.3 about, which is Waldo and hiding in a room with Waldo and a third of an extra person.
He's like half standing behind another guy, like a kid. He's like, oh, you can't see me. And it's like, yeah, we can do.
And I have to say, this is all like probably nation state level stuff, or like it costs a lot of money and have a lot of like stuff to like and analyze
even
this
just setting it all up,
and then sending it. So this is not like your average person buying stuff with Monero. Everyone's watching their stuff. So here's the thing, for average user privacy, kind of like someone doing a few cash fusion rounds or whatever, you're going to be fine. And also, just because amounts will stay hidden, then there's just less information to glean. It's just like, oh, this person sent to this. Okay. It's probably fine. Where it gets dicey, though, is the criminal element. And as I mentioned before, like with, I'm sure people are doing sketchy things on just about every crypto chain. But there's something when you say number one in darknet markets, everyone use this for criminal stuff, and there's actual like all these people on X like marketing hardcore about the criminal stuff, like, oh, use it to do crime. If it's not used for crime, it's not real, like all this stuff. And like, yo, you're building a massive honeypot. And at this point, like, it's now confirmed that for 3.5 years this has been documented and known about, but it's been kind of like the developers have been like slow to not like tell everyone right away. And it doesn't seem like there's a real full-on solution in the ring signature realm here. Like, they're moving to something called full chain membership proofs, which basically means you're hiding in a crowd of all available participants, meaning the whole chain. So in that case, it's just like saying, imagine like everyone sends to some BCH smart contract. So now the entire supply is in this like one address, and then all the transactions are someone sent to someone in this address, but like you can't tell who it was. It's just, you're all the same thing. That's kind of what they're moving towards, but it's like a year or two out. So theirs will be like a 5.5.
I didn't realize it was that slow. I've had these guys saying, I've seen so much shilling about full chain. It's the same thing every crypto does. When their next upgrade is coming, they all shill it like crazy and say, this is going to solve everything. We're going to be number one. You guys don't have any good upgrades like this. But I've been seeing that FCMP. I thought they already had it, but they've been shilling it for so long. It's still if it's 2 years away, we might beat them to it. Like, anyway,
yeah, it
we'll
could
see.
be. It could be year two. A year seems like an optimistic thing. Obviously, you know, refer back to this podcast in a year or two or whenever it comes back and see who was right, I guess, because this is complicated stuff. It takes a while. It fundamentally changes the way Monero operates compared to its entire 11-year history, right? So it's a big thing. It's a big change.
Don't want to fuck it up. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know that the guy who was working on a lot of this stuff, Kayaba Nerve or Luke Parker, I know him. He's a really smart guy and a really cool dude. I think he released like a prototype or basically like he released like a first step and then said I'm backing away from Monero development for a while to do some other stuff. So if it was just him working on it, I'd be like within a year, I'd be like, yeah, sure, absolutely. But like the fact that now it's other people, I don't know how long it's going to take. But so either way, you have this massive stretch of time when delistings happen. So now there's very few ways of acquiring Monero. And so you like, well, let's say 1x like Kraken, like now the feds are going to focus on Kraken, having people on the inside surveilling their stuff. And then where does it go? And then all the dark nets. And then you're able to like pare down those transactions and like figure out who did what. And there's a massive criminal problem coming up, I think. Like to think that the nation state entities have not been like focused mostly on Monero, and they have not known about this at least as long as this Rucknium researcher who did this.
So he's a BCH guy. He loves BCH. So interesting if he's in the mix. That's bodes well for us getting a FCMP cash token at some point, I'd say.
Yeah, but just on the whole, everyone should be super careful with their privacy. And obviously, I think that it's not a good idea to do illegal things just because this is, you know, I'm not moralizing anyone, do whatever you want, but there's just a massive risk, and especially now when that's like super well known and targeted. And of course, as a knock-on effect, this is the privacy stuff that Zeno uses. They use the exact same stuff. And they publicly said they're also going to move to full chain membership proofs, but it will be after Monero does. So Zeno's privacy is, again, it's good privacy, right? Everyone should be using something like this better than fully transparent transactions on the day-to-day, right? But as far as like if you're fighting nation state stuff or you're kind of screwed for a long period of time. So just be really, really careful with that stuff. And so I don't know. It's going to be interesting because also Zeno came out of nowhere, seemingly, because ever since Roger was talking about it, people took an interest in it and started really pumping. It's been doing quite well and all this stuff. And I might be sharing a booth with them in a conference in a near-ish future. So I don't want to piss them off too much, obviously. But, you know, who knows if this is going to take wind out of those sails. But like, I'd rather everyone know about this today and know the risks you're taking so you don't actually get like hurt and not just, oh, my bags didn't pump, but like hurt. And I'd rather have that out now rather than just Monero is gaining steam. Let's be honest. It's the narrative is like a lot of former maxis are moving over there. A lot of other people. It's doing well. And I don't want people to be like all honeypotted into one ecosystem with a fatal flaw in every Fed in the world, just focusing right on this thing. And then you get to just sort of like kill the digital cash space in one go. That's what they want. And that's kind of why, especially at this stage, I'm kind of like at this larva stage of digital cash projects. I kind of think it's kind of like BCH having multiple dev teams. You kind of need to have a few different things out there in case one gets crushed, you can keep on going. And maybe at some point when we get like billions and billions of dollars and everything's going all over the place and everyone's living off this stuff, that it becomes too big to kill. But like, I think that basically diversify and be careful.
But yeah, I mean, that's where you say like they are getting a few converts. That's been really interesting to watch because some of these more hardcore BTC guys have they do this little like hybrid maximalist thing, but then they're also really big on Monero because the community fits with them so well. They can have that same dogmatic approach of just, no, if it's not, it's just the opposite of, it's got to be digital gold. It's got to be number one. It's got to be the original virgin birth Satoshi coin. That just becomes, no, it's got to be the top privacy used on darknet markets. That's the only thing that shows real usage. And I don't care who says otherwise. Like, it's the exact same attitude. So while that's got them some converts, I, in a sense, feel like it might even be a step back for them, because if you ask me, and of course they're not, and they're free to do it however they want to do it, that what they need is to actually chill out a bit. They need to get a bit smarter, basically, rather than more aggro and more single-minded. That's really not going to do them too many favors, but, you know, whatever. That's how they want to do it.
I do agree, and to their credit, in the last couple of years especially, there's been a lot more reasonable people who've been big into Monero, who've gotten into there. There have been a lot more spending tools. It used to be a nightmare. There used to be even no mobile wallets for many years because they couldn't figure out the tech, and then there was no way to spend it. And then now there's like a few gift card dealers and some other places like that. There's like some stuff you can do. I haven't confirmed exactly how, but I do know of a couple people who live unbanked off of Monero, supposedly. And so it's like come some decent ways. And it's, just the aggro side. Like at some point you have to pick a street. Are you going to become money for the world? Or are you going to become money for criminals who want to get arrested? Not even money for criminals, but money for the arrested criminals.
They always say, oh, but Monero's, it's for anyone, not for everyone. And they're like proud of the fact that their community will drive away anybody who is not like a single-minded, you know, agreeing with them on everything and their only strategy. I'm not saying that, being insulting or mocking or bullying people isn't effective, because it is. But if that's the only arrow in your quiver, you're only going to get so far with that. So that seems obvious to me. But
yeah, everything has everything has like a risk. And like we saw this with the El Salvador situation, where the maximalists worked with people from like the Litecoin Foundation and other places to get the attention of the government and get this deal done. But then they cut everyone else out at the last minute, stabbed them in the back. The Litecoin handle was flying off the handle for a while, posting receipts, posting letters from the El Salvador government about how they were working together, like all the receipts that Jack Mallers and the other people stabbed them in the back. And so now no one's doing Bitcoin. Even if Litecoin doesn't like Bitcoin anymore, that's the last friend they had, right? Now it's like done. And so the same thing with like the Monero people beefed hardcore with the Dash people in the early days. And like I remember getting death threats and assassin crowd funds to try to take me out and shit like that in 2016. Like I'll remember those wild days. But then when Zcash came out, that became the number one recipient of the fight. And for a while, the Zcashers were a little like more chill about it. And but then after just so much fun and it's like a Zionist backdoor coin, that this and that, all this nonsense that you see out there. Now they got a bone to pick. Now I've seen the Zcash community not be very gracious about this. I've seen them go out there and be like, see, look, you're going to get wrecked. You're going to get... And like, I don't think that's necessarily the right way of doing things, but at the same time, I understand their frustration. So I don't know. It depends. Like, here's the thing. I think Monero's probably going to be okay long-term, because I think they have enough usage, enough people, information spreads slow enough, etc., to where they're going to be fine while the upgrade gets created. And once it does get launched, then off in the clear again. It's fantastic. Top of the privacy coin pile again. But there just will be people who are not all right in the meantime. And I just want those people, like if people are, dumb criminals, I guess they get caught, whatever. But I don't want people in like, countries where some of the like free speech or funding a dissident movement could get them in big trouble. And they're like, well, Monero is going to protect me. And they don't understand how to mitigate some of these problems, and they could get hurt. And so here's what you got to do if you use Monero and want to have maximum privacy. And again, credit to Duke for all this for getting this out. You receive everything into one wallet. and then you send to your sending wallet and spend out of there. Just by using 2 wallets, something way the ring signatures interact with each other increases the decoy set to where now you're not like able to be narrowed down to that basically one person. It's like you get protection. And so that seems pretty easy, right? You withdraw from the exchange or whatever, or like you just give one person like, here's my receiving address. You get paid in here and you send to a different wallet, and then that's the one that spends. And if you just do that, you're going to be probably fine for the time being. So tell that to the Monero person in your life, and there you go.
Yes, well, if any of them are watching the show, well, that's why I found it so ironic that they were getting riled up with us, because it's like I think it was in the listener survey, wasn't it the number one coin that people held beside BCH? I think just barely ahead of ETH and BTC from the last year. So there you go. I'm sure we have a lot of Monero curious listeners that would be well advised to maybe look into that a little bit more.
Well, it's sort of like the last word on that whole thing is, it's a constant cat and mouse game. Everyone's going to need good privacy in the future. And at some point, I should have someone on my show to talk about different privacy approaches. But like Ethereum already has like ZK privacy if you use the Railgun contract, for example. But because it's like Tornado Cash, but the developers wanted to stay out of prison. So they constructed it in such a way where no one knows anything you're sending in the contract. But if you have transparent funds and they're like linked to the Bybit hacker or whatever, then the contract will reject it on the way in. So you can't, it's kind of no one who's using it can be censored, but if you're known to be this or tainted funds, they can't go in. So it covers the asses like both ways. There's stuff like that can happen. When you put privacy on the contract level, it does a lot of things easier and a lot of things harder. And so like it might be easier to block people from using the contract in like a legal way where, on the chain, it's harder to just say this coin is illegal as a whole. There might be some ways you could monitor and block inflows or outflows. There's also like, I think efficiency losses by using it through contract. This is stuff I haven't really looked into technically too deeply. So there just could be a lot of trade-offs. I've heard people way smarter than me say that you want to upgrade it on the base layer if you can, and not just rely on the contract. But that's above my pay grade. And before BCH comes up with like the best solution ever and everyone gets smashed and you come back and say that guy was a fool, just know that I haven't figured it out yet. So but it's something to think about for sure.
All right, couple of last quick little things as we're getting towards the end of the show. We got Cauldron have raised $3 million at a $20 million valuation. So shout out to them. Good stuff there. And it's nice to see some big money starting to slowly figure its way into the BCH ecosystem. We got to do a lot more of that. We got to get a lot better at pitching VCs and all that. But like all the things we've talked about on this show are basically helping BCH in that arena in terms of the public perception has improved massively, and as well as the coordination and momentum of the community. So I think we're looking good here. And also Blockstream have started raising $1 billion. They recently did 200 million. They're now going for the big 1 billion. Of course, they will have some kind of fake cover story about what that's going to be spent on. But the reality is it's basically going to be spent on stalling any further progress, especially at the protocol layer. So I tweeted Eric Wall and said, man, you raised 30 million to try and get OpCat in, and now Adam Back has raised $1 billion to stop you. That's pretty unlucky. And he replied with a clip of Adam Back saying, talking about OpCat. Maybe we should even find that, Jar. I don't know if you can quickly find that, but it's Adam Back doing his classic move where he kind of says, oh, yeah, there's some good things about OpCat, but there's some bad things too. So I don't know. He just does his classic move of I'm on everyone's side and no one's side. Let's just delay things and see how they work out. So I don't like Eric's odds there of getting this $1 billion to help him out. What do you think?
I would love to know Blockstream's financials. Like, is it a business? It's so there's a local chicken shop close to me that is so unbelievably bad that I can't. And the median customer age is 93. I cannot imagine they're still in business for anything legitimate, but they haven't gone under. So I believe they must be a front for something. And that's kind of what Blockstream is. Like, does anyone pay them money? Do they have any paying customers? What do? Who gives them money? Like, startup capital isn't money. Like, who gives them business? So, and obviously you could say all this stuff about, oh, we have this massive product roadmap and this and that, and get this big influx of money one time. But then the second time, now it starts to look a little more shady. It's like the Patriot Front, like, who are these guys here? It's a little weird.
Yeah, all right. I found the clip. Hang on. Let me just send you this one, chat. This is a classic of. I mean, I was actually mind blown that he thought that this supported his point, really, which as time goes on, I'm just increasingly convinced of how out of touch and unaware all these guys are. So he said Taproot Wizards handshake, Opcat handshake with Blockstream, and this was his supporting evidence.
On a scale of 0 to meow, how much do you love cat?
Opcat. I wish Udi was here for this one.
I guess the argument in favor of cat is that it has no design parameters, so there's less bike shedding, so it might get done sooner. So one argument is start with cat and then see what comes next, which probably means stop with cat as well.
Ha 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 ha! I've conveniently avoided taking any position. Gave a weak positive reason, a weak negative reason, no commentary of his position, and nothing that could ever be pointed to say you're just gaslighting and delaying us, which is the whole point, is what it is. So, anyway, good luck to them with that. Any final words on that before we power through?
Yeah, just like at some point, like. Obviously, I was an early adopter of leaving the BTC fold, right? 2016, as it turns out. So 9 years ago, almost. I kind of cut my losses and moved on to other things. There's so many people that have taken so long. And I feel like this latest wave of Monero people has been those like last few cypherpunk focused Bitcoiners that just like could not stomach fully custodial. Like Lightning is okay because it was like you could use it non-custodial. Well, not even that, but there's always like I can run my own node if I want to, with like Liquid and freaking everything else, and eCash and all that stuff. It was too much. There's still the couple people hanging on. I don't know what they're hanging on for. Like, what are you trying to get with Opcat at this point? Like, as far as I know, it's not going to solve all your problems. You'll be able to do a couple of extra things, but it's still like not. You still won't be able to do everything. And then what?
The argument is that I think the idea is if they can get that in, then they can show, yes, we're not ossified, and then they can say, well, we can do another one now. But the reality, there's just not the activation energy to hit that.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's not like it's over. Like, this is the dead end for BTC development outside of some change. Now, here's the thing. It is possible that when the price starts crashing or something, where people freak out and go, oh, now let's make changes and kick these people out of here. There's also
that's the worst time to do it, though. When everyone's in disarray and panicking, that's when you try and make a radical change, and that guarantees people are going to splinter and be controversial and infighting, which makes the situation worse. Then you're in a negative downwards spiral rather than an upwards one.
Yeah. So it'll remain to be seen. I think at some point we're going to need a big change in Bitcoin for the quantum computing thing, at least. And my prediction is whenever that happens is going to be when the final changes of the network kind of get pushed in. And is it going to be a tail emission? Are they going to be like, well, that's when we get the infinite inflation so you don't have to do anything? Is that when they do it? Are they going to do Opcat at the same time? Are they going to do, what is it, BIP 300 or whatever, Paul Stortz's thing is, drive chains. Are they going to get it in there? Are they going to double or quadruple the base block size at that point? What are they going to do?
No.
What's it going to look like? I don't know. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But it's as far as like Bitcoin's always had a series of improvements, and then they fudded a lot of the improvements. Foremost being, well, you can't hard fork, but then nothing too crazy. Sega was this convoluted thing that, you know, did some cool things, but did some weird, gross things. And then you got like, oh, now we got like Taproot. Now we got these other things that we got to get through. And it just, nothing comes from any of it. And there's just no more ideas as far as like, well, we need to get this. And then there's no next step. This is it. Just like
the great script restoration, man. That's what it is. CTV, CAT, great script restoration. Then we'll have like a shitty BTC in the year like 2045, and we'll be good to go. No.
Yeah, it's cruising altitude. That might be, if you want to like rename this podcast episode, just call it cruising altitude, because it's not like that's what the end of the road looks like. It's not the end of the road where you just like hit it and you die. It's just like, now you're here and you get to fly across the Atlantic with this, and then eventually you got to go down a little bit, I guess. But it's more like, before people say, oh, put this in the Bitcoin obituary. It's not. No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying this is as far as it goes up, and we're here. But price wise, it might go up more. 120K by the end of this year or early next year, maybe. What do you think? Do you think it'll get that high?
Well, I predicted on that even 100K would be a stretch for this bull run. We made it to 108, but if all the momentum dies off from here, I won't be at all surprised. I'll feel super vindicated. So I'm hoping not.
When is Sailor gonna rug? That's what I want to know.
It'll be at the worst possible time too. It'll be right after the quantum thing becomes controversial or something like that. Yeah.
In 11 months, let's say. 10 months, 11 months.
No. He's got another year or two left in him, I think, at least. All right. Quick announcement to go on TapSwap and buy your Bliss 2025 ticket. It's now in a little over 2 months. Also, make sure to prep yourself for the 15th to do a bank run. That's going to be hype. And message to the community, Joel. I know we can't really talk too much about Bliss because we've already run a bit over time. I know you're not going to be there because you already had so many other conferences and you're sort of obliged to as part of being a Dash. So anyway, that's as far as that goes. But as always, you get a message to the community. What do you think the BCH community needs to hear? We've touched on quite a bit, actually. So a few different angles you could go for this one.
Yeah, start living on crypto. I know it's easy to get caught up on all the other stuff around there, but start using it as money, start getting in the trenches. And yeah, it's never been easier to live on crypto than right now. And it's never been more under talked about at the same time. So figure it out and holler at your boy if you want some tips on how.
Yeah, that's it. Okay. Fund me donators. We're going to be coming up to our 10 set of 10 pretty soon. So we'll be, prepping another flip starter there, or fund me probably soon. Majamali Marcelo, founding father, Molecular, the show we love, Erdogan Talk, economics writer, Milton Friedman, Cash Stamps, Keep Calm, Bitcoin Cash, Emergent Reasons. Please experiment with new ways to get you, Celestia and Fiendish, in front of some serious media spotlights. We got the donators, the patrons, Ricky and HP, and our sponsors, General Protocols. Check out bchbull.com, Stock Guide FAQs and links at bitcoincashpodcast.com. If you're new, listen to episode 85. Try Selene wallet at selene.cash. Buy a Bliss ticket at bliss.cash. And yeah, the next release of Selene is going to be really good. It's going to be coming probably in the next week or two. I'm hoping definitely this month, along with another flip starter for another year, and then, or another 6 months probably. And then the release after that is also looking really hype. I'm just going to build some hype for that. I was working on it today. Not the next release, the one after. I think we've got something good cooking. So as always, BCH making daily progress. Final shout outs, Joel?
Yes. So I have to shout out, I know I did this as well, I think when you were on, but I have to shout out to ETHDAM, which is, I believe, you look it up for sure. I think it's May 9th through 11th. Yeah, 9 through 11 in Amsterdam. I will be there for that. A lot of cool people will be there for that. It's a great conference. If you are a Bliss person, you should definitely try to make it a 2-conference thing. I mean, I don't think that Amsterdam's very, very far away. We're all right one into the other. And yeah, I catch a lot of the same, hype because they're extremely privacy focused and cypherpunk issues focused, etc., but also have a wider crypto audience that's not just, the few cash coins. It's kind of everything. So it's definitely a great like a general appetizer for then honing in at Bliss. So I would definitely say, go. And it's obviously run by, former Bcashers of quite good repute. So yeah, make sure to go to that. This will be my 3rd year in a row doing it. So it's the one crypto conference I never want to miss. So there you go.
Amazing. Jet, final shout outs. Nothing. Okay. And my final shout out will go to, Callisti. He's been putting in a ton of good work on Selene. So that next update, not the one that I was hyping up, but the next one that's coming has a ton of performance fixes, a couple bug fixes, and cash tokens, which we have been promising basically since we released it on the day that cash tokens launched. So we got there in the end. That'll be coming very, very soon, and everyone can be trading around their cash tokens with Selene. And then we'll build up, we're going to need to do a follow-up to get in Wallet Connect and, maybe a Cauldron integration, different things like that. But I'm really pleased with the speed that we're coming on. So look out for our flip starter that will be coming for that, and prep yourself for the bank run, because I'm going to be so unbelievably excited if we do it and then we pump another couple of market cap ranks. That will almost have me believing. If we can do it twice in a row, we're going to have to knock out 4 or 5 before I'll really believe. But if we could do 2 in a row and just prove that it wasn't just a coincidence, price is set at the margins, so I can believe it. All right, that's it. Thank you all for listening. Till next time.
Welcome to Bitcoin Today. Bitcoin convention in Florida is taking the industry by storm. While the search is still on for the Bitcoin miner who mined £1 million worth of Bitcoins and threw away the hard drive into the local dump. While in China, the BTC exchange opens for business despite the bank warnings. Just in, it is official, 7-Eleven have now started accepting Bitcoins. Is this the new online currency for the future? Stay tuned.
I had 10,000 Bitcoins, do you know what I would buy? Get you that car you wanted, yeah, the one with a rear-wheel drive. You could teach me how to drift, I'd be so cool, no lie. And I'll sit there by your side as you whiz up the freeway close to 155. If I had 10,000 Bitcoins, I would take us on a tour of all your favorite breweries up and down the coast and more. And we'll sample all your favorite beer and sit out in the sun. And slowly getting drunk all day, it's you and me, we're always having fun. Having lots of money, that won't make you happy. If you're super duper rich but all alone, it's having someone to share the dream. I'm so glad that you share mine with me. If I had 10,000 Bitcoin, I would pay for you to fly, so you could get your license to soar up into the sky on a private plane, so we could disappear at